This video is an in-depth commentary on Mother 3. Mother 3's tumultuous development is almost as famous as the fact that the game has never seen an official English release. It might even be the single most famous game ever not to get an obviously deserved official translation. It took 12 years after the release of Mother 2 for Japanese gamers to get their hands on the sequel, Mother 3, and another 2 years before the Herculean efforts of Clyde Mandelin and the whole Mother 3 fan translation team brought the game to the whole world. As a sequel to a much beloved game over a decade in the making, Mother 3's ambitions are appropriately big. While Mother 2 is almost like a second crack at a lot of the same ideas present in Mother 1, Mother 3 aims to be a true sequel, a direct continuation of the story, improving the gameplay and presentation on every front, and pushing the story into new emotional territory that complements and effectively concludes all the themes already present in the Mother series. The result is pretty universally successful. Mother 3 is one of my all-time favorite games, and I'm very much looking forward to commemorating its 15th anniversary with you as we walk through the game start to finish, and I share my thoughts about its design, history, story, or anything else about the game that warrants commentary. I'll be structuring this video a lot like the Earthbound commentary that I put out in 2017. Maybe check that one out first before watching this. Well, I think that's enough preamble for now. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get this show on the road. And on that note, it might be obvious since this is a complete commentary on Mother 3, but there will be full spoilers for the game ahead. Watch at your own discretion. Like with Earthbound, much of the magic of Mother 3 comes from the little things along the way, feeling the whole journey for yourself. And this video is meant to capture some of that, but I still encourage you to play the game yourself if you're interested in order to get the full experience. The first thing that we do when starting a new game of Mother 3 is name our characters. Now this is a staple of the Mother series at this point. Every game in the series has begun this way. But the difference is that we're not just naming a random group of children this time. We're naming the members of a specific family. There's a younger twin brother, a gentle boy with blonde hair, his older twin brother, an energetic boy with orange hair, their strong, kind, and dependable father, and their beloved mother, and of course, the brave and smart dog. We're also asked for our favorite food and our favorite thing. We were asked all the same questions in Earthbound, but in that game, Mother 2, it almost felt like we were just filling in the cast of characters we were going to meet later. Here, we're creating and personalizing the core family unit that will serve as the emotional heart of the entire game. You can name these characters after your real family if you're an emotional masochist, but I'm going to be rolling with the defaults. If you're playing on an emulator, like most people will be playing Mother 3, then the audio is going to stutter here in the translation patch as it fades out. It's a strange, minor issue, but it did make me think that I was doing something wrong when I was first playing this game. So if you run into the same thing, know that you aren't. Welcome to the world of Mother 3. Or, Welcome to Mother 3 World in the original Japanese. I don't know, I kind of like the way that the English sounds. There's a nice ring to that. Welcome to Mother 3 World. This is Mother 3 World. And Mother 3 World is a bit more conceptually interesting than Mother 2 World. Mother 2 World is pretty much just our world. Eagle Land is America, Scaraba is Arabia, just by way of a couple examples. Mother 3's setting, on the other hand, is the mysterious Nowhere Islands, an archipelago which, as the name implies, doesn't seem to have any clean analogs in reality. And that's not just to do with the geography or the fantastical creatures that live in this place. It runs as deep as the way of life of everyone living here. We'll see more of this as we watch Tazmily change over the course of the game. But in broad strokes, the way of life in Tazmily is ideal and impossible. The first town that we visit in Earthbound is pretty laughable and cynical. Annette is run by incompetent stooges who send kids to break up gangs. Then the cops try to kill you, which is cool. So the point I'm making there is that society in Earthbound, right from the first area, is portrayed cynically, tongue-in-cheek. Mother 3's world is the opposite. From the beginning, it's portrayed optimistically, and that bright-eyed, bushy-tailed spirit carries through to the actual first moments of gameplay we get, waking up as Lucas in his grandfather's log cabin. The one who actually rouses us from our slumber is our brother Klaus. True to his description as an energetic young boy, Klaus is already awake and outside playing, and wants to know when we're gonna get up and join him. One of the first bits of characterization between these brothers is that Klaus is the more active and headstrong one. He's already awake, he's already out there. Lucas lags behind. The reptilian gentle giant Dragos have brought their cute babies over to play. Mother Hianawa wishes Lucas a good morning and encourages him to join his brother playing, but not before changing out of his jammies, of course. Earthbound did the same thing at the beginning. If you refuse to change out of your pajamas, your mom informs you that you can spend the rest of your life inside then. This is a nice, sweet, funny moment, and it does a bit of swift characterization like we just saw with Klaus. She greets you sweetly, has a good enough relationship to joke around with you, and she most importantly is your mother. She tells you you ain't going outside until you put your clothes on. Establishing this relationship is critical for the game, and a lot of compact characterization happens in just a few lines here. As the screen fades into day in sync with the music, and we finally get a chance to run around properly outside for the first time, we get the sense that this game runs and plays a lot smoother than Earthbound. One of the most significant areas receiving attention that you immediately feel are animations. Animations are more responsive, detailed, and fluid across the board. This represents a bigger improvement than you might think. Considering that the Mother series pretty much lives or dies on its ability to get you to resonate with it emotionally, it stands to gain a lot by being able to make all the actors on its stage more expressive and lively. No doubt that some of these decisions were related to the hardware. This game came out on a Game Boy Advance after all, a device which has a small screen and that you hold in your hands. This limits the amount of real estate that we have to show what's going on, but Mother 3's solution to this is to tighten the field of view, make the animations read better by getting even closer, let us see everything. This was the right decision. Mother 3's pixel art kind of belies how many improvements there have been made to the presentation. I'm not going to front load all of those here, but as we encounter them, I'm going to call them out. Once we've had our fill of talking to our grandpa's farm animals, we can choose to chat up the save frog before heading east to play with our brother. Save frogs are how you save in Mother 3, if the name didn't give it away. They replaced the telephones where you could call your dad up to save in Mother 2. Mother 3's constantly rotating cast of playable characters, as well as the lack of availability of Lucas's father as the story goes on, make the frogs a fun and novel way to save. Back to the story. When we head east, we meet Klaus, who's already playing rough with the Dragos. This gives way to some tutorialization about how to run, but while we're learning this, there's some economical characterization that's taking place too. The Dragos are massive T-Rexes basically. They could bite our heads off in one clean chomp like no problem. But they are gentle. They have no problem with Klaus and Lucas ramming headfirst into him with all their strength. They take the hit, pause, and then fall over feigning injury. This is the way that adults play with children. The Dragos are empathetic and have a recognition of the fragility of these kids. The relationship between human beings and nature is one of Mother 3's many big themes, and right off the bat, the relationship is depicted as a harmonious one, characterized by respect and fair play. Now this bit of cross-species bonding is interrupted by a rambunctious mole cricket, whose intrusion serves as an easy and effective combat tutorial. Bracketing the combat system itself for a bit, we'll revisit it later. It's significant that it's Lucas and Klaus together in combat for the first fight of the game. Mother 3 makes frequent use of the time-tested storytelling device of accumulating meaning through repetition and bookending. Without getting too ahead of ourselves, this isn't going to be the last time that these brothers are in combat together, so it's fitting that the first fight of the game, even against a silly mole cricket, is Lucas and Klaus. After beating up the mole cricket and lighting a fire for vengeance in its heart, our mom Hinawa comes by to collect everyone for a delicious omelet lunch. Though not without stepping on our new mole cricket rival, which no doubt just intensifies his bloodlust. There's a moment here right as the scene is wrapping up where Alec, Lucas and Klaus' grandfather, pauses to address the player directly and just straight up tell him how to save. He does it in a humorous, shifty way as if he's not trying to get caught doing it. Mother 3 is definitely of the press the select button, Snake school of tutorialization. When you're dealing with games like Metal Gear or Mother, games that make central thematic use of breaking the fourth wall, you're often primed to accept some of the more metafictional aspects of the story through simple addresses regarding the game mechanics along the way. You're sort of massaged into accepting this direct form of address. At the lunch table, Klaus is talkative and energetic as ever, chatting up our mom while she's busy writing home to our father. Your favorite food is the same as ours? We make a good match! Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Hinawa is writing back to our dad Flint and letting him know that we're on our way home through the forest. Alec, not forebodingly at all, reminds us just how safe the forest is, that even little crybaby Lucas could make it home on his own through the forest. On that note, our mom steps outside to send a message to our father by bird. Coming back to Mother 3's effective use of repetition, Hinawa's letter is one of the best examples in the game. I'm going to read it in its entirety here so that we can revisit it later and get the full effect of seeing it in a different context. Dear Flint, just like you said they would, the children have been running around the mountains and fields tirelessly since the moment we arrived. Klaus is as daring and full of energy as ever, while Lucas is still a bit coddled, but neither one seems tired of playing at all. My father seems sad to say goodbye to his grandchildren after seeing them for the first time in so long, but we should be home by this evening. I'd forgotten how nice and refreshing the mountain air is. You're always covered in the smell of sheep back in Tasmally Village, so I really wish you could have been here to take in this air. The next time we visit, let's ask one of our neighbors to tend to the sheep, so we can all come up here as a family. Klaus, Lucas, and I were always thinking about you. When we get home this evening, I'll start cooking some of your favorite omelets right away. With love, your dearest Hinawa. Life is pretty good on the Nowhere Islands. At this moment, right now, our family has nothing bigger to worry about than when we're getting home for dinner. But a shadow is cast over the idol by a strange round machine in the sky blaring an obnoxious imperial march. This is the anthem of King P. As the tune floats down, it distorts all the ambient audio as well, a clear and ominous sign that everything is about to change. And this is when we get our title drop. Welcome to Mother 3. And that is just Mother 3, no subtitles. There were originally some being tossed around for use with the game, like Mother 3, Forest of the Chimera, or Mother 3, The Fall of the Pig King. But ultimately, Shigesato Itoi decided just to title the game Mother 3. And his rationale makes a lot of sense. The decision is rooted in Itoi's philosophy about how much the player brings to the table in a video game uniquely as a medium. This is an excerpt from a Fabi.net translation of an interview Itoi gave with Nintendo Dream magazine. The meaning behind a game changes a lot between players. Players add more than half of the meaning and value to games, which is more than any other mode of expression. So I feel like that half that you've added is entirely your own. All I did was provide assistance. So keeping that in mind, subtitles have too strong a message that says, I want you to look at it this way. It narrows that world that belongs to the player. My personal feelings steer me to want to affirm everything the player thinks about the game. I wanted to make Mother 3 like a mirror, one that reflects the heart of the player off of the screen. He's right. Mother 3 is a much better title than Mother 3, Forest of the Chimera. We're watching the forest burn right now, but we're not going to spend the whole game in the forest. Also, if it was called Fall of the Pig King, we know that Pig King's gonna fall. Choosing to forego a big, bold subtitle is just one of many ways that Mother 3 definitely gets out of its own way so that it can connect with you emotionally as effectively as possible. Chapter 1, Night of the Funeral. The title here is a dead giveaway that things are about to get ugly. Thomas, Tasmali's local fireman, rushes south through the fire and chaos with a frantic running animation unique to him to go get Lucas's father Flint for help. As Thomas pounds and yanks on the door, he actually pulls off our doorknob and it goes bouncing off screen. The doorknob serves a meta-narrative purpose within the story. It almost acts like the bouncing ball that would guide you through the lyrics of an old Disney sing-along tape. The doorknob will follow us through the whole game up until literally the very last moment. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right in front of us, the situation is that the forest is on fire. Flint, being the dependable badass father that he is eager to help. We're playing as Lucas's father now, and buckle up because we won't be playing as Lucas again for a very long time. Mother 3 doubles down on some of the sequences featured in Earthbound, where you would shift points of view to a different character. Earthbound used those sequences rarely. One of the standouts is when you take control of Jeff in Winters, responding to the psychic outreach of Paula to go rescue Ness and Paula from under the graveyard in Threed. In Mother 3, by contrast, you're going to spend a lot more time playing as characters other than the protagonist who's the face of the game. Mother 3 makes some smart choices to make this multiple shifting protagonist thing work better than it certainly otherwise could have. Because this is a sequel to Mother 2 where you play as Ness, and Mother 1 where you play as Tanetane, a character who's very, very similar, you're expecting to play as a little boy like Lucas in this game. You start this game playing as Lucas in the tutorial with Lucas in class that we just saw. So that expectation is already there and is met with the first few moments of gameplay. After that, we shift to a different protagonist. So the promise is still there, and we're given the satisfaction of running around as Lucas for a little bit before the story kind of sinks its hooks in us and moves us to occupy Flint's perspective. And that's the second trick that makes this work. It's Flint's perspective, Dad's perspective. We're taking the point of view of somebody intimately connected to Lucas and whose objective is to save Lucas. The result, at least for me, was that I was actually invested in and enjoying this part, rather than just tapping my feet waiting for it to be over. As we run around picking up presents full of nut bread, we get a chance to introduce ourselves to Tasmally Village and the people who live there. I want to focus in on the people for a second, because this is yet another way that Mother 3 is immediately differentiating itself from Earthbound. The NPCs in Tasmally aren't faceless, generic approximations of hippie dudes or rocker boys or purse-wielding ladies. They are actual people with actual names, and at this point, every one of them has a unique sprite and unique name. Now, as Tasmally changes and modernizes over the course of the game, and more people come in, there are going to be some generic faces in the mix. But this core group, this core named group of Tasmally villagers from the beginning, is going to stay with us through the course of Mother 3. On our way to the forest, we're advised that the gods would appreciate us saying a prayer in the chapel, which we're happy to do. This prayer involves another Mother series staple, entering your real name, you, the player, holding the controller, or the Game Boy in this case. The game wants you to put your name in here and forget about it until it chooses to call on it later at the very end. At this point, we know that the Mother series is bound to do something big with what we're inputting here. For some minor foreshadowing of what's to come later, the design on the altar is one of two dragons circling each other. This will be relevant for when our name becomes relevant later. Heading into the forest itself, we run into our first real combat encounter. First thing you're going to notice right off the bat compared to Earthbound is that there's a lot more going on here. Even though the game hasn't tutorialized music combat yet, it's not too hard to stumble into just by tapping the A button, as one is likely to do while playing a game like this. But mechanics aside, even if you're just sitting there dumbly mashing the A button once every turn, you're getting a lot more audio-visual feedback from the fight. Every playable character in your party has a unique instrument associated with them, and Flint is no exception. Every time you hit an enemy, it layers over a weird improvisational riff with that character's unique instrument. This means that combat, even at its most simplistic stages in Mother 3, is never just as simple as hitting the A button through a bunch of samey menus. After our first combat encounter, we get our first exposure to Mother 3's hot springs, which is how we heal in this game for the most part. Hot Springs 1 are more convenient and accessible than the hotels and hospitals in Earthbound were, and 2, they make a lot more sense as a healing method in a game that really only has one central metropolitan area. It wouldn't make sense to be stumbling into hospitals everywhere you go. The hot springs have a fun little theme with a whoop 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 in the background, which makes it a little relaxing stay every time you need to heal. It's a chance to take a breath, not an instant heal. Another presentational change that becomes apparent as we're running through the forest in this stage is the interaction of environmental hazards on the players you're just running around the overworld. These wildfires can damage you and cause your health UI to show up on screen without taking you out of the moment. One of Mother 2's strengths was how it blurred the lines between overworlds, towns, dialogue and combat, video game music, and diegetic in-game music. Mother 3 continues this tradition with more simple touches, like getting torched for minor damage while walking around the overworld by these flames. Functionally, these flames also help tutorialize and simplify this section. They block off certain areas and give you a clear path forward. And on that path north, we find that Lighter has been knocked unconscious. His house is on fire and his son Fuel is stuck there. It's up to us to save him. It seems like these fireflies are responsible for the blaze. When we inspect one, Flint notes that it's not one that he's ever seen before. Fuel calls for help from the attic. He's been trapped inside by some kind of freaky mechanical rat. By putting Mother 3's new sprinting mechanics to good use to burst through some obstacles and fighting a mini-boss, Flint is able to just barely save Fuel before the burning house collapses. This is a bit of ominous foreshadowing because we left Lucas, Klaus, and Mom back at a log cabin deep within the forest. Could be suffering a similar fate. A happy, narrowly won reunion for Leiter's family gives way to a conversation with Isaac outside the Yado Inn who reminds us, we haven't seen our family since all this chaos broke out. We grit our teeth and rush home, desperately hoping for the unlikely outcome that Hinama, Klaus, and Lucas will be waiting there for us. Instead, we're greeted by the messenger bird our wife sent us, and we read her words again, set to a more somber reprise of the tune we read it against the first time. Dear Flint, just like you said they would, the children have been running around the mountains and fields tirelessly since the moment we arrived. Klaus is as daring and full of energy as ever, while Lucas is still a bit coddled, but neither one seems tired of playing at all. My father seems sad to say goodbye to his grandchildren after seeing them for the first time in so long, but we should be home by this evening. This evening is now. I had forgotten how nice and refreshing the mountain air is. You're always covered in the smell of sheep back in Tasmally Village, so I really wish you could have been here to take in this air. The next time we visit, let's ask one of our neighbors to tend to the sheep, so we can all come up here as a family. If we'd only been there with them. Klaus, Lucas, and I were always thinking about you. When we get home this evening, I'll start cooking some of your favorite omelets right away. With love, your dearest Hinawa. Flint just stands there lifelessly in the cold rain as the text crawls across the screen in a funeral march. After taking a moment to rest and compose ourselves, we set out with our brave and trusty dog Boney to search for our family, with all the villagers of Tasmally mobilized to help us. There's a lot of world building and characterization going into Chapter 1. One thing that it makes very clear early on is that the people of Tasmally are there for each other. When there's a disaster, everyone drops everything to help. This is the essential altruistic character of Tasmally that we're going to see assaulted over the course of the game. It's established early so we can mourn its loss later. So we head back into the forest looking for our family. Now we have a second party member in tow, which makes the combat quite a bit easier. But it's not just easier, it's more interesting because we have more to do. Flint is our primary damage dealer, with Boney being a light supplemental chip damage dealer with high speed and the ability to sniff out enemy weaknesses. It's worth noting that Boney is now the second character, including Lucas, who we played for a second at the start of the game, who's joined our party and will actually be there to the end. Flint will not stay with us, Boney will. We fight our way through the forest. Brief shout out for my man Reggie here. A fire, then rain, and then children smiles. It will be alright. Reggie knows it. Both the content and presentation of Reggie's point here sum up Mother 3's ethos in a nutshell. All the NPCs in Mother 3 are memorable pretty much, but another worthy of shouting out here are Bud and Lou, who are a manzai duo, a specific type of Japanese comedy that relies on a straight man and a doofus. In the north end of the forest, we get to a dead end clearly mangled by Drago claw marks, which doesn't make sense. They're normally such peaceful creatures, but it has been such a strange night in the forest already. Up a sheer cliff, Boney alerts us to a scrap of red cloth that looks just like Hinawa's. This is where Old Man Wes offers us his son Duster's help. Wes talks down about his son in a corny old man sort of way, but he insists that he'll be able to get the job done. Wes gives Boney one of Duster's smelly socks, and then brave little Boney takes off by himself back through the forest to go get Duster. We get a fun little adventurous montage of Boney running back in the cold, driving rain. Run, Boney, run! Good boy! You can do it! Duster is a heavy sleeper, so not wanting to waste any time trying to actually rouse him, Boney just starts dragging his keister all the way back through the forest, back north. At some point, off camera, Duster wakes up and starts running of his own volition to see what all the trouble is. He is dependable, if a little slow. Thanks to Duster's unique thief training, we're able to climb up the wall using wall staples, one of Duster's specialties that we'll later see action with in combat. When we get to the top and actually add the scrap of cloth to our inventory, there's a unique sad jingle that plays when we collect this sad item. There's a lot of attention to detail in this game. Even though the interaction is very simple there's a different inflection. I'm going to freeze the frame for a second. One odd thing about this cave is that on the west side, there's a simplified rendering of Japan, which might be hard to recognize if you're a stupid American like myself. Not quite sure why that's there, but it's kind of an interesting way for the game to reach out to the player. And also, this cave sonically reaches back out to the player by echoing the like UFO sound effects from Earthbound. They're very iconic, and they haven't shown up in this game until this point, where we seem to be getting a more vanilla combat experience with a direct, arbitrary reference to Japan, the country. Strange. Not quite sure what to make of this cave, but it's worth remarking on. Up ahead, we encounter some strange-looking guys who are clearly up to no good. They sick their reconstructed caribou on us, and we're into our first major boss fight. The reconstructed caribou is the most extreme example yet of a chimera, which are the creepy mechanized beasts that we've been fighting to this point. A gross, arbitrary smushing together of mechanical parts and biological creatures, these chimeras are driven by pain and rage, and they clearly should not exist. After putting this poor chimera out of its misery and chasing off the pig masks, we get a glimpse of their notebook, where we get a sense of their directive. All the creatures around here suck. We need to make them cooler, so the theme will be tougher, rougher, badder. We'll mix and match this and that to create whole new things no one's ever seen before. The tone here is clear. This is arbitrary. This is someone's game. We're not able to get a hold of the pig mask responsible for this abomination, but thankfully, climbing back down, we're informed, thank God, that our sons are okay. We reunite with them, but it's just the two of them, alone. They're shivering, they can barely speak. Something's clearly wrong. Bronson comes in bearing the classic good news, bad news routine, delivering the latter with zero tact. The good news, he says, he found a good weapon, a Drago Fang, that could be used for something later. The bad news, the Drago Fang was found embedded in our wife's heart. Hinawa is dead. This is the worst possible way to deliver this news. It's extra painful to be hit with this in such a ham-fisted way. Evidently, this ham-fisted delivery was planned since the early stages of Earthbound 64. Early screenshots have some form of this good news, bad news routine still present, even in the early stages of forming this scene. Part of this is probably related to the fact that tragedy is unfamiliar for the people of Tazmily. They don't know how to react, how to handle someone's grief in a moment like this. But another factor here is that delivering the news in such a horrifically blunt way to Flint contributes to explain his outburst here. And man, is this outburst ugly. The pressure is all let out of the balloon all at once in the most inappropriate way, and Flint is completely inconsolable. He lashes out, hurting several villagers before Lighter, the man Flint saved just a couple hours ago, clubs him over the head with his lumber. This ugly, violent outburst plays out right in front of Lucas and Klaus, who just watched their mother die. Tessie tries to cover their eyes. It's tragic. The one thing that Lucas and Klaus need most right now is for Flint to be strong, for him to do anything but what he's doing right now. Not only is Flint failing to be there for his family right now when they need him, he's setting an example for Klaus that will be his undoing. As Flint loses consciousness, we see a vision of the last time this whole family was ever all together. Hinawa says goodbye to Boney and Flint as Lucas and Klaus excitedly pull her along to go visit Grandpa Alec. After wishing them goodbye, Flint adjusts his hat, buckles down for a day of tending sheep, blissfully unaware that his family will never be whole again. The love theme that's playing right now is a powerful emotional anchor for Mother 3. It was established as an upbeat version running around Mom's hometown, Alec's log cabin at the very start of the game. This rendition, the love theme, symbolizes everything that this family has and everything that they've lost. Hinawa fades into a blinding white light and walks off, and we know that she is truly, truly gone. We wake up, embarrassingly, in Tasmali's jail. Tasmali Village has never had a need for a jail before this point. We are its first inmate ever. Congratulations, us. Crushingly, Bronson informs us that our wife's funeral has already taken place. Our outburst meant that we couldn't be there, for ourselves, or more importantly, for our family who survives. It also means that we're powerless to stop Klaus from running off after the Drago who killed Hinawa. By the time we're free, Klaus is long gone, and will be a very, very long time before we see him again. The series of events that lead to Flint not being able to be there for his family at this critical time when they so desperately need him, this is his greatest failing as a father. When we speak to Duster outside, he offers us some much-needed, genuine, earnest consolation in this, our lowest moment. At this point, we make our way, far too late, to the place our wife has been laid to rest. Alec, Lucas, and Boney are all there mourning ahead of us. Alec is especially numb, having just buried his only daughter. When we talk to Lucas, he confirms that Klaus ran off to try to kill the Drago who killed their mother, a guaranteed suicide mission. Klaus told Lucas what he was doing in the hopes that Lucas wouldn't rat, but Lucas, being an honest boy who's concerned for his brother's safety, lets the cat out of the bag. Alec reacts in anger, not helping. This is a case of shooting the messenger, which is never a good thing, but especially not when the messenger is your own grief-stricken grandson. Unfortunately, time is of the essence, and we can't sit around telling Lucas everything will be okay. We need to act. After gathering some supplies and getting the Drago Fang that killed our wife from Bronson, we head back through the forest to go and try to save Klaus from his own recklessness. If we get lost along the way to Alec's cabin, or if we just have the random inclination to explore the farm to the south of Tasmali, we'll see that there's a strange Arabian man complimenting Butch's pigs. Strange, but we have bigger things to worry about right now. We reunite with Alec, who says we might have a better time finding Klaus if we go and visit his friends the Magypsies, who Klaus himself might have already paid a visit to. The Magypsies. There's a lot to say about them, so may as well start the discussion here. They have mysterious powers. They've been here protecting something for a long time. They're neither human nor beast, neither man nor woman, and no one knows how old they are. When we meet them, they are extremely flamboyant, potentially stereotypical representations of very, very masculine traits and very, very feminine traits in one package. The Magypsies are controversial, and sometimes they're described as one of the main reasons Mother 3 hasn't been localized. Now, is that true? We don't really know. Are they controversial? Yes. Are they trans? I don't think so. I think you'll have a better time interpreting this game, and a more accurate interpretation, if you look at them in the way that I'm about to describe. The Magypsies are definitively not human. They are humanoid, but they are not literally human beings. Instead, they're benevolent, flamboyant amalgams of some of the best traits in humanity, including masculinity and femininity. They exemplify both in force, rather than being some kind of androgynous average of both. To clarify and expand on that, they are highly abstract representations of all kinds of different traits human beings can have, including masculine traits and feminine traits. It's not literally about representing any particular real-world group, but rather serving as an abstract mirror for human traits. Now, obviously, you can view the Magypsies, Mother 3, and the people who made Mother 3 however you want, and there are no doubt real-world stereotypes that inspire the designs of some of these characters, but thematically and functionally within the story, I think it's most appropriate to view the Magypsies as complex mirrors of all human traits, rather than a simple transplantation, no pun intended, of some real-world human group. Back to the plot. Speaking to the Magypsies, we learn that they awaken PSI abilities within Klaus and sent him on his way to go fight the Drago. Again, this may seem strange and unwise, and Alec certainly thinks so, but the Magypsies, again, are not human. Their job is not to talk sense into a reckless child, but they are still good-natured and provided Klaus with abilities to help protect himself on his quest. wasn't their job to influence his direction, but they're happy to help. Likewise, they're happy to help us too, even though they're emotionally detached from the outcome of our situation. Another piece of information we learn here is about the Magypsies themselves. There are 7 of them, but only 6 are gathered here. The Magypsies are named after the 7 diatonic modes of music. I'm not smart enough to know what any of this means, but those modes are the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian modes. Each mode forms scales slightly differently. The Magypsies, in turn, are named after these modes: Ionia, Doria, Phrygia, Lydia, Mixolydia, Aeolia, and Locria. Locria is the one who's not present with us. We'll have more to say about the Magypsies later, but we'll leave the topic be for now. After a flatulent journey through the caves and mountains of Mount Oriander, we find Klaus's shoe and the Drago baby from the start of the game that Klaus was playing with. Klaus, unfortunately, is nowhere to be found, but the baby is clearly in distress. At the top of the mountain, next to the Drago nest, we find Klaus's other shoe, and then a terrifying, reconstructed Papa Drago emerges from behind the rocks. This is the final boss of Chapter 1, and it's our toughest fight yet. But if we make good use of Flint's special abilities and heal up with the items that we have, we should be okay. With the more detailed sprite within combat, we can see the heavy scarring on the Drago, as well as the brutal mechanical alterations made to it. The Pigmas have changed the nature of this peaceful creature in such a horrible way, and they've done it, as we can visually see, with a great deal of violence. You'll also notice that it's missing the fang on the upper right side of its mouth, upper left side from our point of view. This is the fang that killed Hinawa, and we use it to pierce the Mechadrago's tough hide so that we can finally get through and start doing real damage. After a tough battle, we come out on top. There's a scripted bit where we take mortal damage before the fight actually ends, so we get to see the ticking health meter that would take us down to 0 halt as the battle comes to a close, and we get a chance to breathe. Everyone, Alec, the Drago, and Flint are barely alive, but Flint climbs to his feet. The Drago does too. It seems powered only by rage and programmed violence. But the beating we lay down on it is too great. Its body can't sustain its violence anymore. It's helpless. We have it cornered. After all this, we could strike this Drago down. We could kill it. But what would be the point? We didn't find Klaus. What would be the point of inflicting the same trauma that our sons just endured on this baby Drago? Wouldn't solve anything, as Alec correctly observes. Chapter 1 ends with a twistedly ironic peek over the cliffs, where we can see Klaus, shoeless, collapsed far out of sight of Alec and Flint. It is possible that until now the people of Tazmily Village had never known sadness. On sunny days and on cloudy days, they always greeted each other with smiles. They lived in harmony with the creatures of the forest. The strong would help the weak, and those who had would share with those who had not. However, it now appears the villagers have learned all too much about sadness. Suddenly, everything is changing for the worse. When did this change begin? Where did it begin? What set it in motion and why? We have some more insight into that than the characters in this world do, having played Earthbound. Almost as if toys, the peaceful animals are being transformed into strange, ferocious creatures that attack people. Some people, like Flint, have even had their families torn apart. Just what is this suspicious group that wears pig masks? What are these eerie objects that soar through the once beautiful skies? And where could the missing Klaus be? The mysteries continue to pile up, and so the tale first begins, as a tragedy. A tragedy for sure. What Mother 3 attempts and accomplishes successfully, I think, in this first chapter deserves to be commended. It's very ambitious, and it's a big departure from Earthbound's much simpler beginning. We've been introduced to a very abstract world, already been through one change of protagonist, endured a loss that we haven't seen the likes of in the Mother series to this point. It's a lot of work being done by this first chapter. After this concluding text crawl and an opportunity to save, we flash back to when Flint emerged from jail. He and Duster have the same conversation as before, only this time, Flint responds. Duster, thanks. He then takes off to do what we just did, and then the camera pans over to Duster. We're now in Duster's shoes, and that brings us to Chapter 2. After the high-stakes emotional and expository action that concluded Chapter 1, Chapter 2 lets us catch our breath for a second by opening on a much lower-key scene in a dark forest where Wes is telling Duster that it's time to put his thief skills into action. The song that plays in Duster's house is really interesting. It has a unique instrumentation that I don't know what it is, but I like it. Wes tasks us with infiltrating Osohe Castle and retrieving a very, very important item with our thief skills. He says that we'll know it when we see it. To go arm ourselves for the task, each of our thief tools is represented by a literal item box in our basement. As we head off to complete our mission, we'll notice that running around his Duster, he has a limp in his right leg. This is great attention to detail in the sprite work, especially when your point of reference is Earthbound, where the word heli on a helicopter was mirrored incorrectly when they were flipping the sprite to show it moving the other direction. Here, Duster and all characters have 8-directional movement animations, and Duster himself, having an asymmetrical gait, is represented with even more detail and unique sprites. On our way to the castle, we'll run into 2 people we haven't quite been introduced to yet, Facade and the monkey Salsa. More to come on them later. We also run into a bewildered Butch who's just been convinced to part ways with his goods in exchange for money? Which, not sure what that is yet, but more to come. Heading north, we see the Pigmask dropping something on the castle up to the north and surrounding area. This leads to zombies springing forth from the ground and attacking Duster, which is pretty horrifying put next to the fact that we just buried Lucas's mother in the same cemetery. Let's not think about that. We put the undead down and find that our path to Osohe Castle is blocked. Thankfully, though, there's a secret passage in the gravedigger Nippolite's house. We follow the tunnel through and emerge in the courtyard, where we see Nippolite giving the castle courtyard the Stardew Valley treatment. On the west side of the courtyard, he's even growing Lucas's family's favorite food, whatever that is, which by default is omelets, so this is a patch of omelets, like cooked eggs growing from the ground. I'm not going to think about it too much. We use Duster's thief skills to get us up onto the roof, where we break our way inside and promptly get crushed by a boulder and die. So this is as good an opportunity as any to talk about the mechanics of saving and loading in Mother 3. So to save, you talk to frogs. To load, when you die, you're respawning at the last frog that you saved at. However, in the current session of the game, your progress is preserved. So for example, if you go and level up 3 times after saving and then die, you will reload 3 levels higher than when you actually saved. So your progress is preserved. Another quirk that accompanies this behavior is that items that you use stay consumed even when you reload. So it's a double-edged sword. It means that you can throw yourself at a problem over and over again, grind it out essentially, and always be moving forward. But the downside is that if you're strategizing with items, you have to really make that one attempt where you're actually using the item count. Because if you use your item and fail the fight, that item is gone unless you restart your game. This is all worth talking about now because Duster's foray into Osohe Castle alone is one of the tougher sections of gameplay in the game. Duster has no party with him, he's just by himself, and so he has to rely on the items he's able to collect and just the strength of his raw stats, which is honestly influenced by his level. These factors combined mean that, especially while you're lower leveled, you're going to be running back down to that hot spring in the basement a lot to heal, which slows this section of the game down. Pacing-wise, this isn't too much of a problem because we've just had a very, very dense opener by way of Chapter 1, but the game slows down a lot here. But that's not to say that Osohe is boring. It has a lot of character. The currency here in this castle haunted by ghosts and suits of armor are rotten eclairs, relevant for us in that the Ghost Bazaar to the north serves as a way to stock up on healing items here, which we'll need, given no party members capable of healing, as well as purchase the critically important rope snake that we'll need to continue. If you're like me and most people in the West who played Smash Brothers before playing Mother 3, you'll recognize the rope snake as Lucas's grab. In Mother 3 though, the brash and boastful rope snake is more closely associated with Duster. Lucas never actually uses this rope snake. The rope snake is just one of Mother 3's many different personified gameplay mechanics, like the row of ants that block your path earlier in the game, or the mole crickets tutorializing combat. Mother 3's philosophy is why make something a text prompt when it could be a character? And speaking of character, this ballroom full of ghosts just having the time of their life in this ruined ballroom is one of the most memorable moments in Osohe Castle in Chapter 2. We see one trying to sip wine as it just falls through its ghostly body, another one doing the same with food, some people enjoying the music, banging on the piano. Even though this place is dead and abandoned, it's still lively somehow, and Mother 3 is expressing that with a simple little vignette here. We fight a disgusting piece of jelly that resembles Mr. Belch from Earthbound in the kitchen, and then we proceed upstairs. Plenty of carpet monsters, rockin' ghosts, and a formidable shield and sword to keep us busy and earning experience on our way to the boss fight of this place. We reach the room at the end of the hall upstairs and find ourselves face to face with a ghostly conductor, Mr. Passion. When we disrespect his music, the fight is on. Mr. Passion is the most difficult fight so far, and beating him requires effective use of our abilities, our thief tools as Duster, as well as effective use as the musical rhythm battle system. By keeping our heads on straight, we push through the fight and are able to claim the royal something or other that we came here to get in the first place. This is the Noble Spittoon. Job well done, Duster. Even as we're here, we can inspect the wall and feel wind blowing through the cracks on the other side, and there's a bizarre ritualistic dance imprinted on the walls too. There's more to this place that we haven't seen yet. So it's time to head home and return to Wes, and when we head outside, we notice that it's daytime now. We've been in the castle so long that the time's actually changed. This is just one way that Mother 3 is showing its ability to move the world forward without you. It's going to continue to do this over the course of the game. When we return back to Wes, expecting to be celebrated, he is not happy with our quarry. Wes throws the royal spittoon to the ground, shattering it into 1,000 pieces, which sends Duster reeling. It's a great gag, and it gives us a reason to return to Osohe Castle to do the job right this time, with Wes in tow. Wes clarifies another thing for us. The owner of the pendant that we found in Osohe Castle, from that mysterious girl who dropped from the ceiling and ran off, that pendant belongs to the princess of Osohe Castle. Putting two and two together, we brushed past the princess and didn't recognize it. When we return to Osohe, we see that the pigmass have barreled their way inside, breaking down the gate with their tanks, hurting Nippolite, and tearing up the omelet patch. Unforgivable. Once we make our way inside, we see that the pigmass have made a real mess of the place. After we've gotten thoroughly used to Osohe after spending so much time here alone as Duster, now everything's different. There aren't any ghosts, the place is filled with pigmass and their disgusting slop junk food, and the claymen that they bring with them. The claymen, we don't know too much about them yet, but it seems like they're just lumps of clay that will do whatever the pigmasks want when jolted with electricity. Much of the pigmass deeper mission is to mold the people of Tazmily villages into automatons not unlike these claymen. We're getting our first look at the robotic ideal that the pigmasks are trying to prop up here. All the ghosts have been shoved unceremoniously into a kitchen. It's strange how this place feels more dead with less ghosts in it. Eventually we make our way back to the chamber we found the Noble Spittoon in, and Wes tells us that the real treasure is further within. He examines the walls with the strange ritual markings, and he sees that someone else has also passed through this door recently, and he prepares to open it himself, but he insists that we turn around first. Don't look now! I'm not gonna stick my butt out or anything like that! This is Wes performing the traditional Osohe monkey dance, or open sesame dance. This is a fun little feature of the world that this is just how people in this ancient civilization open doors. It's a dance that can be learned, practiced, perfected, and put into motion to open doors of this specific kind. We're going to see this dance repeated a few times through the game. I like that the way the door opens seems to be laughing at the dancer. It opens its mouth and then kind of ho 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 for a second before letting you through. This is the kind of thing that you would only ever see and would only ever work in a Mother game. On the other side of the door, we catch a glimpse of the open courtyard that was producing the breeze we felt earlier, and see a needle-like object protruding from the ground mysteriously down below. This isn't what we came here to get, but it's going to remain in our minds. In the next room, we almost catch a psychic blast from the girl we saw earlier, and it seems like she knows Wes. This is Princess Kumatora, a strong, wise, and rather masculine girl who was jointly raised by Wes, discreetly, and the Magypsies, the Princess of Osohei Castle, a civilization that no longer exists. As a result, she's not exactly bound by princessy decorum. The word on the wind, just some omniscient voice on the wind, tells us that Kumatora is a user of psi abilities, and we get to put those to the test with some of the creatures that we're going to fight in the next rooms. The introduction of psychic abilities in a new party member makes combat even better and more complex. Having more decisions, more abilities, more elemental weaknesses to exploit makes combat a more engaging experience, which is good because if we get swept away by these brooms, we're going to have to climb the whole damn tower again. So, good thing the combat is a little better. Making our way to the top of the tower, we find what we really came here for, the certain important item. The Egg of Light. Unfortunately, we have no time to celebrate or understand what this egg is used for because we get cornered by the pig mask in the treasure room. Kumatora hastily grabs the egg, which triggers a hilarious Indiana Jones-style trap which Wes planted, which conveniently creates an escape route for us down a trapdoor. When we land in this pool of skulls in the dungeon below Osohei, we're face to face with a massive Oso snake, which visually is a direct callback to the Kraken that we fought in Earthbound. When we defeat the snake, and we get flushed out of the toilet that is this room, separately back out into the world through the river. This is now the second time that we've been attached to a playable character for an entire chapter, and now they're going to be ripped away from us. We were playing as Duster, and now we pick back up as Kumatora. Only for a moment, though. We hardly have time to begin our search for Duster before Butch is accusing Wes of cooperating with Duster to steal his money. Bracketing the fact that we know what Duster's been up to all this time, he couldn't have done what Butch is saying, and bracketing the question of what the hell is money, there's an instant difference, a change that's happened between the way the village responds to a catastrophe in Chapter 1 versus Chapter 2. We have a problem here. Duster is missing, we're not sure where he is, and instead of getting support from the village, we get accusations and apathy. Kumatora is too hot-headed to let these accusations fly without dishing out some justice, which is met with more hostility from the townspeople. Flint and Boney arrive at a really opportune time to cool the situation down. Flint himself has also grown from Chapter 1, where he was unable to control himself in the wake of his wife's death. Now he's the one bringing a cooler head to the situation. With equilibrium restored for a moment, we're forced to ask, what is going on in Tazmily? What has driven these changes? There's something in the air. The mysterious group that has been tinkering with the forest creatures in an almost toy-like fashion has finally commenced its plan to alter the town, the lives, and even the hearts of the people. It seems as if a grand scheme of some sort is hidden behind the actions of the suspicious peddler who has recently arrived. However, not everyone is content to sit quietly by as the enemy continues its odious attacks from every angle. Flint, whose family bonds were torn to shreds, Wes and his son Duster, the thieves of justice, Princess Kumatora, the mysterious girl who suddenly appeared. Destiny is bringing together those who would use their power for good. And what has become of Lucas, the crybaby? Well, we're not going to find out for a while longer still, because we have some monkey business to attend to. And that brings us to the desert. A pig-masked mothership touches down in the desert, far away. It's not unlike the ship that we saw flee after we defeated the reconstructed Caribou, only this one is much, much larger. A terrified monkey emerges from the ship and is kicked down into the sand, and so begins a chapter of abuse. So, Chapter 3 has us take the role of Salsa, a poor monkey who's being tortured sadistically by the Pigmask army and the peddler that we bumped into earlier, who evidently is some sort of leader to them. This is Facade, and Facade is subjecting us, poor little monkey Salsa, to some of the most sadistic and humiliating torture possible. He's going to kill our girlfriend, Samba, if we disobey. And to keep us in line, he has a shock collar that he can zap us with at will, at any time. Facade tortures us to make us dance in exactly the way that he wants to, when he wants to. Right now, we have zero understanding as to why any of this is being done to us, but the amount of torture for no reason is very over the top. This makes Facade very easy to hate right off the bat. But gameplay-wise, this puts us in an awkward situation. We are just a weak little monkey. We can barely do any damage to the enemies that we encounter, and they do a lot of damage to us. We actually rely on Facade to do the bulk of the damage to these enemies and earn the killing blows. This creates a very palpable and abusive tension between the player and Facade. He won't even let you keep the items that you find. When you find a luxury banana, he comes on over, takes it from you, eats it in front of you, and then throws the peel on the ground. Insult to injury. We save a save frog from a great antlion in the desert. Then the game takes a moment to justify to us for some reason why there would be frogs in a desert by sharing some facts about desert frogs. It's a nice touch, I like it. After defeating a cactus wolf guarding some sort of pueblo with a weird swirly symbol on it, we open the door and take the elevator down into a very, very strange place. The whole dynamic of this scene is interesting. You feel that Facade has complete control over you and is way stronger than you. You're forced to go wherever he wants to take you. And this abrupt change from the desert to a strange, industrial, horrifically messy underground area makes us wonder, where is Facade taking us? We also get introduced by Facade to a piece of pig mask technology that's familiar to us from having played Earthbound, an instant revitalizing chamber. This heals us right away, just like the hot springs do, but in a much more inorganic way. This technology, for some reason, is associated with the pig masks. We will definitely talk about this more later when we address the leader of the pig masks and all the attendant lore around that, but for starters, we can observe that when we're seeing elements like the revitalizing chamber lifted directly from Earthbound and dropped into Mother 3, it's usually in a context that seems wrong or off, and in this instance, reintroducing this familiar way to heal in a very abusive context casts it in a different light. We travel through some very utilitarian access roads underground in the Pork Bean and find ourselves emerging from a grave in Tasmally Cemetery. There's very little chance that anyone in Tasmally knows that this accessway exists. There's an entire underground system of tunnels and militarized construction that is being built under everyone's noses. How long has this been in motion? Facade leads us down to the Yado Inn where we're going to stay for the night. We know where that is, so we can make our way down there. Heading south, we run into Butch, who Facade has already given his big bag of money to. We see this from a different point of view now, and we know that Facade can't be up to any good given what we know about him. Heading further south, we bump into Duster, who, this time, seeing it from Salsa's point of view, we wish that we could just yell, "Please help me," to, but these internal calls fall on deaf ears. Facade listens with glee as Butch covetously describes how he's hiding his money to Duster. He laughs, knowing that the seeds of money that he's planted have already taken root. At night, Facade sneaks out of his room at the Yado Inn to plan the attack that we're later going to see take place at Osohe Castle. Not only do we see Facade planning all of this violence that's about to take place, we see him taking Butch's money out of the well too. He's intentionally sowing chaos. He knows the trouble that this is going to cause amongst the people tomorrow, and that's the goal. He also catches us trying to catch a peek of what he's up to, which we catch a lot of shocks for. At night, we can't even escape this horror in our dreams. We just relive the nightmare of the day, and are then woken up for a fresh helping by an electroshock in the morning. It's here that Facade makes clear what our real purpose is, to dance around charming the villagers while he hawks his happy boxes, his way in to corrupt the minds of everyone in Tasmally. Facade serves a similar role in the story of Mother 3 that the serpent serves in the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The serpent suggested to Eve, that she eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because there was knowledge to be had there, additional happiness or wisdom that she didn't have before. And this is ultimately what brings God's punishment upon humanity. It's the assumption that God hasn't provided you with enough, that you need more to be happy. And this is the point that Facade is trying to impress upon all the villagers. You think you're happy, but couldn't you be happier? The destabilizing influence of Satan on humanity in the biblical story, and the destabilizing influence of Facade on Tazmily Village in Mother 3 is essentially the same. A whisperer of lies with bad intentions persuading people that they need more than they have. But what exactly is more, and will getting more stuff lead to more happiness? These are questions that aren't asked and not explored. Why bother? There's a dancing monkey. Not everyone is persuaded by this pitch, but 4 people are, and 4 people is better than no people. 4 people is enough to start some social momentum building. And so these become the first customers for Facade's Happy Box program. None of these people who've raised their hands are bad people. These are the same people who went out in the rain trying to help Flint find his family not too long ago. These are well-intentioned people who have listened to what this peddler has had to say, heard the pitch for happiness, and thought, you know what? I would like to be more happy. Who wouldn't like to be more happy? Facade gives us a limited amount of time to deliver the happy boxes to their new customers. This requires a few back and forth trips to and from the cemetery to pick up a new box and deliver it to its destination. Although there are 4 customers, Abbott and Abby are husband and wife and live together, so they actually only need 1 happy box between them. That cuts our work down to delivering to only 3 places rather than 4. This still gives us ample opportunity to slowly walk from one side of Tazmily Village's map to another. This gives us a chance to fully explore Tazmily in the state that it is before Chapter 4, which will involve a time skip. So we get one last lay of the land before things change in a serious way. And we, right now, are bringing that change. Change doesn't just happen to Tazmily, we're seeing the other point of view that is pushing this change on the village. Of course, no matter how fast we deliver this change, it's not fast enough for Facade, who relishes another opportunity to shock us and then drags us all the way to Osohei Castle to lead the attack that we were on the receiving end of in Chapter 2. We make our way down to the basement just in time to see Kumatora, Duster, and West flow on past us after beating the Oso snake. Just missed him. We regroup and make our way back to town with Facade to play out the controversy that we saw unfold between Butch and Wes, this time from the point of view of the people stoking the flames. The scene plays out as we remember, except this time, Salsa flashes Kumatora a kind of pleading look, the same kind that he tried to show Duster, except Kumatora, having psychic abilities, is able to sense that something is wrong, that Salsa needs help. This is the message in a bottle needed to get Wes and Kumatora to come and break Salsa free that night at the Yado. Unfortunately, the gang is caught mid-escape and everyone tries to run away back into the forest. Kumatora is slowest on the draw, reflecting her slow speed stat in the game. Her running away animation is also unique for this specific scenario. It looks pulled straight out of the Marx Brothers. We flee into the forest, fighting our way through pig masks and chimeras until we're eventually cornered in the north side by a couple of pork tanks. This fight is tough. I died a couple times on this playthrough. You have to do enough damage to the tank to get the pork trooper inside to poke out the top. At that point, you should be able to close out the fight pretty quickly with PK Thunder as he pathetically tries to throw cannonballs at you. We come out on top, but it's a short-lived victory. It took everything that we had to beat one pork tank, and we barely survived. And there are more where that one came from. Facade and all the pig masks corner us. Now then, Princess Kumatora, may I ask that you behave and do as we say? Kumatora and Wes rescued Salsa, but who rescues the rescuer? Who watches the watchman? The answer to that question is Lucas. Right away, Facade and the Pigmass underestimate this stupid kid, like people have been underestimating Lucas his whole life. At which point, he whistles, and his Drago baby buddy drops down, and his mom is not far behind. Lucas's Drago friends make short work of the pigmass, and Salsa is able to give the final sassy declaration for the Drago to attack Facade. It's a satisfying conclusion for Chapter 3 to end with Facade taking the beating he's been earning all chapter. With the threat taken care of, Kumatora and Wes catch up with Lucas on everything that they've both mutually missed. The group gets acquainted with one another and tell Lucas the story of everything that's happened up to this point. Wes and Kumatora are going to go into hiding and to look for Duster, and Lucas is encouraged to stay in Tazmily Village to wait for his brother Klaus to return. Kumatora and Salsa part ways with us, and a text crawl comes over the screen. This is really the game wrapping up its 3 introductory chapters and plotting a course for how Tazmily is going to change in the next few years. Tazmily Village is now transforming exactly how the newly come peddler had planned. Only a handful of villagers realize that things that were good and right are being tossed away one after the other. Although prosperity is increasing, an eerie darkness seems to be growing heavier over the village at the same time. However, within that darkness, a frail young boy grows ever stronger. Soon Lucas will repaint this tale of sadness with a bright new color. The deeper the darkness, the brighter the sunrise at dawn. The once coddled Lucas is now on his way to becoming a brilliant young son. As the chapter comes to an end, we can spend a second reflecting on where Lucas is at now that the real story, the real adventure of Mother 3 is starting. Lucas is already farther along than Ness as far as personal growth goes. His process of self-discovery and growth, Lucas has already lost his mother. He's already summoned the courage to befriend the very beast that killed her. He's done a lot of living already, and has a lot more living left to do to deal with the grief that doesn't go away from the loss of his mother, and the ongoing concern of his lost brother Klaus. We see a vision of when things were good. We see visions of how we got to where we are now. We see a vision of Lucas and his father mourning for Hinawa. Lucas there with the flowers. Flash to white, and we see an older Lucas stand up, face the camera, and carry us into Chapter 4. Three years later, and things in Tazmily Village have changed a lot. The first most obvious sign of this is the train. That's new. By the time the screen fades in on Tazmily Village itself, as the villagers, who we know and love, disembark the train from whatever factory job they just finished up with, we see that everything is different. People no longer live in conjoined townhouse-style living. They have separate homes, yards. The city square is far more developed. The Yado is no longer a humble inn, it's more like a hotel. Tazmily itself resembles Annette or Tucson more than the pastoral village that we met at the start of the game. At the center of all the change, talking up a storm in the town square, is Facade, of course. Mother 3 is able to pack a high density of story value into relatively few locations by simply having the same location that we care about, Tazmily, change over the course of the game. That change is given ample context for us to feel something about it. And another feature of this change is that it's personally connected to our character, or rather disconnected from our character. Lucas, waking up with his bedhead and his pajamas, reminiscing about his mom telling him to change out of his pajamas on the last happy day of his life 3 years ago, all reminds us that the world has moved on without him, but Lucas can't leave that behind. Change may be exciting for everyone else in the village, but Lucas just wishes things could go back to the way they were. That feeling will only intensify over the course of the game. This is a good chance to talk about the importance of the actual title, Mother. I'm not trying to take away any of the themes of family and home that are very central to Mother 1 and Mother 2, but I will say that Mother 3 features the themes of motherly love much more front and center, and the connection between Lucas and Klaus, Lucas and his father, is mediated through the love of the mother in a way that is not as central in the previous 2 games in the series. And this is even clearer when we consider that your mother's death is a central plot point, the inciting incident of the game. The whole emotional kit and caboodle is wrapped up in the word and concept mother. But let's come back to Earth for a second. Boney offers to take us for a walk after a random strike of lightning, destroys our sheep pen. Maybe if we had a happy box in our house, this wouldn't have happened. Speaking of happy boxes, these sickly green glowing boxes have become ubiquitous in Tasmally. But you know, despite there being happy boxes all over the place, and despite Tasmally being far more developed, nobody seems happier to me. A second ago, I touched on the instant revitalizing chambers, the carryovers from Earthbound that seem strange and out of place. The same is true for the hotel theme. The Yado Inn now resembles a normal hotel from our normal world, or the hotels from Earthbound, which is modeled after our world. As such, it's using the same exact theme from Earthbound. But because it's accompanied by so many strange, unpleasant changes, we can't just feel blindly nostalgic about this music. Let's keep this in mind as we move through the game, and especially as the references to Earthbound escalate in the back half of Mother 3. So maybe to give a framework of how to think about these examples, these references to Earthbound that we're going to see, we should keep in mind that Earthbound looks a lot more like our real modern world than Mother 3 did at the start of the game. The game is going to resist your attempts to view the changes to Tasmally and the increasing resemblance to Earthbound as some unambiguous positive or nostalgic thing. And we'll definitely see this in Chapter 5, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Another major innovation that Tasmally saw over the course of these 3 years is the widespread introduction and adoption of money. The fever that possessed Butch in Chapter 2 has now infected everyone. But who can blame them? Facade is still here, actively peddling his point of view. And it works. People want to be happy. You tell them, hey, there's a better way. The grass is greener over there. People will listen. And Facade knows and exploits this. Devilish. Literally devilish. Another change to Tasmally is that there are now faceless people all over the place. Before, Tasmally was a tightly knit community of unique individual people. We knew all of their names. Now, there are a lot of folks walking around just by man or woman. The presence of these people echoes the generally less recognizable Tasmally village of 3 years in the future. It seems like Lucas's family isn't the only one being left in the dust, though. If we explore enough, we can see that Reggie's hut has also been zapped by lightning recently. It doesn't take too much brain power to put together the obvious clues that these lightning strikes are the work of the pigmass, putting the screws to you to make sure you get a happy box and fall in line. The totalitarian plan that the pigmass are rolling out is not one of blitzkrieg domination. It's a slow creep that changes minds, but is willing to apply force when needed. There are signs of the changing times all around. One noteworthy one is that the jail that previously had its inaugural use with our father Flint is now full of people we don't recognize, and a dog. The complications of more modernized living bring with it crime, punishment, and eventually trash and decay, but we're not quite there yet. Oh, and here's a present with a reggae rhythm inside. There's a lot to see in the new and allegedly improved Tasmally, but what nudges us along to the next point in the story is overhearing a conversation between Jackie and Bronson. Apparently, there's a bass player at the concert hall at Club Tittyboo where all the workers from the factory go to decompress after a long day's shift. Nobody's seen Duster in 3 years, nor has anyone seen Klaus in 3 years. This is at least a place to start. After getting this intel and heading back into the town square, we see Wes trying to talk some sense into people, trying to steer them away from Facade's lies. But the people aren't interested in what Wes has to say. After all, things are great now. We have frogs and cars. Wes gets hauled back off to the old folks' home like the old chunk of coal that he is. We should probably go check on him. Headed east, we find that Wes and Duster's house has been converted into Old Man's Paradise, a retirement home that is anything but a paradise. It was built over the remains of what was originally Wes's and Duster's house after it was conveniently struck by lightning. And it doesn't hurt that Duster is a scapegoat, no longer around, and Wes is a loud old man who's causing trouble all the time. The best solutions are the most convenient solutions. It is really sad to see our grandfather Alec confined to a room like this, The walls are cracked, there are bars on the window, a happy box issues a sickly green light from the corner. It looks like even the mouse is trying to escape. There are claw marks leading up the side, like it's trying to get out. They almost resemble the tally marks that somebody would inscribe on a prison wall to mark the number of days that they're in there. Even though Wes is old and treated like he's nobody, the fire in him hasn't gone out. He's very interested to hear that you have a lead on somebody who looks just like Duster. He lowers his voice to a whisper. Wes can't get away with sneaking out of the old folks' home or else Facade and his goons will stop him. Apparently they have that kind of power now. But Lucas is just a kid and people tend to ignore him. He can head east along the tracks, travel up the mountain to Club Titty-Boo, and see if this mysterious bass player is really Duster. Before heading out, we can visit our mother's grave, and we'll find our father there, paying his respects. He says that it's been a while and that we should have a chat with our mom. When we examine the tombstone, we see a vision. It's nothing profound, it's just a little moment from Lucas and Klaus's childhood when things were simpler. 3 years ago or more, Lucas and Klaus run up to their mom, who's working with the laundry. Boney sniffs the ground and plays with them for a little bit. They talk about something. Who knows what, maybe what they're going to have for dinner, omelets, and then they run inside after their mom. When people are gone, you cling to those conversations with them, those little moments that you can still remember. Wife of Flint, mother of the twins Klaus and Lucas, daughter of Alec, may the beautiful Hinawa rest in peace here for all time. Heading east along the tracks on our way to the club, we have to fight a few mushrooms and chimeras, but without the benefit of any PSI abilities. At this stage, it's worth noting that Lucas has PP, and Boney, Flint, and Duster have not. In fact, Lucas and Klaus have had PP since the beginning tutorial fight with the mole cricket at the beginning of the game. So the game signals us, literally through battle text, that there's latent psychic ability in these children, but we don't have access to it yet. Conveniently, on our way to the factory, we find Ionia bathing in a hot spring. And much like the Magypsies did for our brother Klaus, Ionia is more than willing to, unlock our latent psychic abilities through very interesting means. We're not exactly shown what's happening, but we can use our imaginations. I'm not sure what we're supposed to be imagining, though. When Lucas's head bobs back above water, he awakes with a basket of psychic abilities, including 2 healing abilities and his signature move, PK Love. Armed with our newfound psychic abilities, we continue right and righter still, and if we've been incautious and have been walking on the tracks, we'll get a chance to leap out of the way for dear life. This is just another one of these situation-specific, unique animations that injects a lot of personality into the game. After a very long hike, we arrive at the factory. This is one way that Mother 3 is able to communicate the value of money. The reason we had to walk is because we didn't have enough money to take the train. It sure would have been nice to be able to skip over all of that. Furthermore, we don't have enough money to go directly to the club. We have to pay to take the lift. And if we haven't learned the value of money by now, we're certainly going to after we put in an arduous shift at the Clayman factory. A Pigmask captain is more than happy to sign us up for some part-time work, and when we get the paperwork, the game slyly suggests that we should make sure that the real name we input in the temple earlier is still correct. This is a chance to correct a mistake if you made one, or maybe decide that you'd like to include your full name, or maybe remove your last name, or maybe double down on your decision to treat the whole game as a joke and confirm that you'd like to keep your name as whatever racial epithet you picked in the first place. Anyways, so we get oriented and Boney is put to work on a treadmill while we go downstairs to deal with the Claymen. Our part-time task is simple. We need to round up 3 malfunctioning Claymen to be decommissioned and recycled. This, while simple, is not quick. The process of retrieving the Clayman for recycling requires that we find a malfunctioning one and slowly push it all the way back across the map to the elevator where it can be turned into, I don't know, some kind of more useful mud that can be reshaped and then re-zapped into a short, pathetic existence as a Clayman again. Because it takes so long to move these Claymen across the map, and there's nothing else going on in this section, we have no choice but to take our time and really turn over how awful working here is, and more broadly what the implications of working here are. While you might say that only the claymen are being treated as expendable and zapped into purpose, the people working here are being similarly stimulated, manipulated, and used. These people aren't happy, they're only working here because it's the only way to get to Club Titty Boo, and they only need to get to Club Titty Boo because somebody told them that they'd be happy if they went to Club Titty Boo. This is the dopamine cycle that Facade and the Pigmask created for the villagers, and the way that they exploit that cycle is to turn it toward Clayman production. This creates a bizarre situation where the Claymen, who are what are being produced by this factory, are somewhat fungible with the people producing them, because the villagers producing the Claymen are worth X amount of Claymen per day. This is amplified by the fact that there are people and Claymen working together in these mines to mine more clay to make more Claymen. Human beings are just another resource in this equation. They're the fuel. I say that this situation is bizarre, but it's not unlike our modernizing times. If you work at an Amazon warehouse, you're going to be working alongside an army of robots that are constantly on the march to replace you. If you work at a McDonald's, you're probably going to be called on to help maintain the sales kiosks who only exist to make you taking customers' order a redundancy. This is basically Mother 3's take on the rat race. The villagers of Tasmally are throwing themselves like coal onto the Pigmask engine of war. And what does it take for them to do this? Some coercion and the prospect of a little bit of excitement at the club. This all harkens back to the master of the Pigmask, whoever that is, generally blasé and objectifying way of looking at people. If you'll indulge me talking about Immanuel Kant for a second. Immanuel Kant was a philosopher who had an idea called the categorical imperative. An imperative is categorical or universal if it is absolute, if conditions do not affect what you must do. Kant's second formulation of the categorical imperative is one rooted in humanity, specifically the way that you must acknowledge the humanity of others. This is something that the Pigmasks do not do. Kant said, act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. That means that you can never just use people as instruments to get what you want. You have to treat others, other people themselves, as goals worthy of achieving and maximizing their flourishing. Couldn't be farther from what's happening down in these mines. And maybe it's just the fumes in here making my head go all loopy, but I've got the feeling that if we or any of the workers down here were to outlive our usefulness, then the Pigmasks wouldn't hesitate to throw us on the mulch pile just like they've thrown these Claymen on there. And there probably would be some other workers happy to toss us on the pile, if it'll mean a trip to Club Titty Boo. After a job well done, we are reunited with Boney and given the reward for our efforts, a ticket to the club. Hey, and $200. We appreciate that because now we know the value of $1. When we exit the factory, the day has passed us by and it's nighttime now. We've got a ticket that we can take up the ropeway to the club. After a grueling, partial day's work, I'm sure we're ready for some R&R. The Mother series has always prided itself on eclectic modes of transportation, and the ropeway is just another entry on a ever-growing list. If we peek through the binoculars, we can see just how far we've come, the factory down below, and the ominous profile of Thunder Tower that will be the centerpiece of the next chapter. Our attempt to enter Club Titty Boo is rebuffed by Neckbeard and Skinhead. Fantastic names, guys. No dogs allowed at the club, I'm afraid. Sorry, Boney. Fortunately, we're masters of disguise, and we return with Boney disguised as a dog-like dude. This is beyond ridiculous, and the plan almost doesn't work if not for the intervention of Violet, who identifies us as the decidedly underage-smelling Pooh and the dog-smelling Woof. Of course, this is Kumatora who's come to rescue us, and just in the nick of time, too. She gets us inside and reminds us who she is. She tells us to go into the concert hall and just watch the DCMC concert. We'll meet up after the fact and get our bearings. Excitement is in the air as the club gets ready for DCMC's next song. DCMC are Mother 3's incarnation of Earthbound's Runaway 5. At first, I wasn't crazy about DCMC, and I think that's intentional. For starters, Duster is with them playing the bass under a different identity. It's like they're holding him captive or something. And then when they actually start playing music, they don't play anything good. They play the Pigmass marching theme. It's about the lamest thing you could pick. So I was cold to DCMC at first. But as we get to know them over the course of Mother 3, I think that they stand head and shoulders above the Runaway 5 as one of the most memorable musical groups in a video game. But for now, they're playing the awful trumpetous propaganda anthem of the mysterious, to this point unnamed, Master P. So after the concert, we follow Violet through a secret passage in the hall to the east, and then find ourselves upstairs and in the backstage green room area of the club. Kumatora offers us a chance to rest up in her fancy shower, and then a text crawl fills us in and sets us on our next immediate direction in the story. Rather than have us endure that conversation at length, they summarize. The three converse at great length, filling in the 3-year gap that separated them. They discuss salsa, they discuss the Egg of Light that they stole from Osahei Castle and how it hasn't been found since Duster went missing 3 years ago. They discuss the fact that Lucky, the bass player of DCMC, seems to be Duster, and they talk about how Tazmily has changed in radical ways over the last 3 years. In this scene, we are getting some narrative clarity on what exactly is happening, some factual statements about the Pigmass being behind the changes in Tazmily, but we're also seeing that the protagonists, Lucas and his friends, are willing to talk through these things. There's a lot of reasons throughout the game for this, but this scene is making me realize that I have a much easier time envisioning the members of Lucas's party talking to one another than I do with Nintens or NES's. Okay, so the text crawl break gives way to one of the most difficult sections in the game by a mile, and in my opinion, it's one of the worst. The goal here is to climb up into the attic, navigate the passages up there, and then drop down through the ceiling to talk some sense into Duster. Easier said than done. The attic itself is labyrinthine. There are tons of enemies and they run all over the place, so they're tough to avoid. And here's the real trouble. The boss, Duster's jealous old base that he put aside for his new model, is just too high a level for this part of the game. Odds are you're going to throw yourself against this guy and fail and level up on your way failing until you eventually get it. Mother 3 is not a particularly grindy game, but I don't accept the line that there's no grinding in this game. I think that there are certain parts where you are best served by just leveling up a little bit before you continue. It's not a major roadblock, and maybe compared to other JRPGs, this isn't a very grindy one, but compared to video games where you don't have to grind, there's certain parts, like this one being the worst, where you just need to level up a little bit before you can have a sensible shot at beating this boss. And you know, we use this as an opportunity to talk about how the saving and loading systems kind of quirkily interact with combat. An encounter like this, where you can get a lot of mileage out of careful use of items, it doesn't quite gel with the way loading and continuing works in this game. Because while your items might allow the fight to work out in your favor, some of those items are actually RNG based, and maybe you still fail after you use up all your items. Well, what then? Do you continue without your items and just throw yourself at the boss and level up until you can finally get it? Or do you turn the game off, reload, lose your experience, but retain your items and give it a second shot that way? It just doesn't feel like there's a real good solution, except the one where you just win by attrition, but that doesn't feel great either. The Jealous Base is a fun boss concept in concept, but in practice, he makes some of the most uneven seams of the combat system stand out. So, defeating the Jealous Base, we reunite with Kumatora and find ourselves face to face with Duster, Lucky, and meet the rest of DCMC for the first time. Lucky recounts the story of how he came to consciousness with no memory of anything, except that he needed to protect the egg that he stole earlier. Kumatora puts 2 and 2 together that this egg must be hidden in Unknown Valley at the foot of Thunder Tower. So with our next destination in mind, it's clear what we need to do, but there's still the case of Duster's mistaken identity to resolve. We're going to use the band's tried and tested method of conflict resolution, stone sheet clippers. There is a strategy to this that you can participate in if you want. Bakio and Lucky always pick clippers, Magic and Shimmy's Miz always pick stone, and OJ always picks sheet. But if Lucas loses any of these matches, the bandmate just figures out some reason why it wasn't a valid match, and they throw again. You could say that the members of DCMC are just being obtuse or silly, but I think that they know what's up, and that they know Duster had a life before them. They're just honoring their decision-making ritual, but of course they're gonna let Duster go with us. They're going through the motions out of respect for Lucky and for each other. So we win Stone Sheet Clippers 5 times in a row, and earn the right to have Lucky, or Duster, come with us. But as we're leaving, Duster notices that there's someone on stage. It's DCMC, here to play one last song, for their bass player, Lucky. And this is where DCMC started to win me over. Bon voyage, amigo. This is one of the best scenes in the game. Instead of Porky's anthem, the gang are belting out an original ballad in honor of both Lucky and Duster, and all the strange twists of fate that brought all of us here tonight at Club Titty-Boo. Kumatora, Lucas, and Boney have the respect for Duster and what he's been through to step outside for this moment. We see visions of Duster learning how to play the bass, practicing, trying to fit in, trying to get better and better. You can just tell by the way that Magic lays on the licks of that guitar solo how much love and appreciation everyone in the band has for their bassist Lucky. The world has changed faster than anyone has the capability to understand and deal with properly. In this crazy world, all we have is each other, and DCMC was there for Duster. Lucky takes off his afro one last time and offers it back to the band. Tanda Gasa. Thanks, guys. And Bon Voyage, amigo is the refrain in reply. Mother 3 really gets a lot of mileage out of simple sprite animations and careful pacing and directions in these very simple cutscenes. The Bon Voyage Amigo sequence is a real standout, but it's not the only one. And with that, Lucas releases the dove signaling to Wes that Duster is back and he's okay. Our permanent party composition is now together for the first time, and with that, it's on to Chapter 5. The teaser for Chapter 5 shows us Thunder Tower in action for the first time. Before, its activities were implied off-screen, like when we saw the train in the first part of Chapter 4. Because Thunder Tower is controlled by the Pigmask, you don't really know if these are actually blasting enemies of the Pigmask army, or if it's just for arbitrary fun. So Chapter 5 proper begins with a flashback of a delirious Lucky hiding the Egg of Light inside of a clayman in Unknown Valley. And we begin trying to retrace Duster's steps under what's now a highway overpass. The highway system is going to be a fixture of this chapter, so it's fitting that we start with that in our foreground view. The chimeras that we're fighting are getting increasingly gnarly as we move out of the cave and into the valley itself. Reconstructed lions and parental kanga sharks are among our foes now. Both the organic bases for these creatures and the cybernetic modifications made to them are bigger and deadlier. We eventually find the clayman that Duster buried the Egg of Light in. Lucky for us, no pun intended. But before we can enjoy this fortunate development, a seriously inopportune bolt of lightning zaps the clayman back to life, and it takes off at top speed in reverse away from us. Why don't we use this opportunity to talk about Thunder Tower itself and the use of lightning in Mother 3. Mother 3 repeats itself in a good way, accumulating meaning through repetition of key symbols. One of these key symbols is lightning. We'll discover that Porky has a residence up near the top of Thunder Tower later. From there, he and his crew zap creatures and people down below with callous abandon. Lightning is the force that the Pigmask used to animate the Clayman as well. It's what Facade uses to torture Salsa. Lightning will continue to be relevant late into the story. Thunder Tower is a physical monument to lightning. For now, we're thrust into a search for the Egg of Light, and chasing after this Clayman that carries it will have us headed into Thunder Tower itself. When we approach the base of Thunder Tower, the Pigmasks are terrified of Lucas for some reason. They mistake us for someone else, their commander, the Masked Man. For whatever reason, we're a spitting image of him. They dress us up in his uniform to make sure we're not setting a bad example for the men. Looks like their commander wears some sort of pilgrim-like outfit, militarized pilgrim uniform. With this disguise, it seems like even the highest-ranking Pigmass colonels are deferring to us. They tell us that the Clayman we're after has just been loaded into a garbage truck and has been hauled off for disposal. We can't let that happen, there's a sacred artifact in there. We give chase across huge expanses of highway. It becomes clear quickly that it's going to take a long time to catch up with this garbage truck, especially if there's all these enemies in the way. Thankfully, a Pigmass soldier stops and lends us the use of his pork bean, after which he gets stuck in a permanent salute pose. This is very silly, but it actually serves a practical purpose in that if we accidentally end up retracing our steps, later we'll know that we're doing so because we'll see that saluting guy. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Lucas and company are that skilled at operating the pork bean because they managed to slip on some banana peels even though their vehicle is floating. A pork trooper stops by to survey the damage and offers to help us, but for some reason, he must be some kind of genius or something, but he can see through our disguises. This gives way to a fun, challenging fight against the pork trooper that gives us a chance to really flex what we can do with a 4-person party. The battle theme for this fight is Unfounded Revenge. It's one of the better ones in the game and serves as the musical inspiration for Papyrus's theme from Undertale, if you recognize that. So we defeat the pork trooper and keep making our way east to the dump, where we're hoping to find the Clayman. But, unfortunately, because I was stupid and forgot to charge the pork bean, it runs out of power on the bridge. There is no way to recharge it at this point. It's going to be stuck here for the remainder of this playthrough. This doesn't actually hurt us in any way, it just makes it slower to get around. So, joke's on us, I guess. So we painstakingly make our way over to the dump on foot, fighting many enemies along the way, and eventually have a sad fight with this broken hunk of used-up Clayman. This thing is a reminder of the fate of anything that outlives its usefulness in the Pigmass world. It doesn't take too much lateral thinking to imagine that they view the old folks at Old Man's Paradise in a similar way to this pile of garbage. People are useful and acceptable to the Pigmass if they are pliant and productive. Once you've given everything you have, you are neither, and are worth less than nothing. After we retrieve the Egg of Light, we're escorted to the VIP staff entrance of Thunder Tower. Ooh, fancy. Climbing the tower in our Pigmass disguises, we encounter the ultimate DCMC superfan, a badass mofo pork trooper who stands between us and the top of the tower. This fight is easier than it seems because DCMC merchandise is super effective against this fella. After beating the fierce pork trooper, Facade corners us and forces us higher up the tower. On our way up, we fight ridiculous little construction-related doodads. I particularly like the Screw Loose, it's a good name for an enemy. We climb the ladder at the top of the construction scaffolding area and find ourselves in a very strange playroom of sorts. This is Master P's room. Not Master P's only room, this is Master P's home away from home. Of course, he needs a place to unwind wherever he goes. This is the most delirious level of excess that a kid would dream up of what would be the coolest playroom possible. Oh, there would be a car, and there would be a mummy, and there would be a plane, and then there would be also a guitar, and an arcade, and a bike. And whoever this Master P is, they are juvenile. They seem to be an unconstrained, childlike id with infinite access to resources. A bad combination indeed. If we make the mistake of touching Master King P's very precious friend's yo-yo, then we engage in an optional boss fight against Little Miss Marshmallow. Our reward for completing the fight is the friend's yo-yo. It's not difficult to connect the clues that this is obviously Ness's yo-yo, but the game stops short of actually saying this, and it stops short of saying King Master P's real name either. Climbing all the way up the tower to the generator room has us fighting Mr. Janitor, an appropriate name for the caretaker of this installation. If you happen to have any by this point, the saltwater gun or items like it are effective at taking down Janitor quickly. We're still being chased and we're still cornered, but we were able to deal a serious blow to this instrument of Pigmass destruction. Just when it seems like Facade has us where he wants us. Facade's about to escape, we're about to be blown up with the rest of Thunder Tower, but at the last moment, Facade slips on his own banana peel and we're able to hitch the ride that was meant for him. We're holding on to the rope snake for dear life, and just as it seems like we might be able to maintain our grip, the masked man himself, the one we impersonated earlier, comes out to survey us, the hangers-on. At this point, the pigmass ship starts flying around wildly, and it becomes impossible for the rope snake to maintain its grip anymore. Here, the rope snake decides to assert himself as a character in the story. "Duster, it's me, the rope snake. I know this isn't the best time to chat, but I've got bad news and I've got good news." Second time this game has done that. Well, the punchline of the good news, bad news routine this time is that the good news is that the rope snake is important now, and the bad news is that he can't hold on anymore. The masked man admires a job well done and heads back into the ship. And then we get our text crawl that signals the end of the first half of Mother 3. Moving puppets made from clumps of earth, a tower that can fire thunderbolts on demand, an extensive highway system, ships that fly through the sky. The enemy that Lucas and his companions must stand up against has grown to such an enormous scale. Do they even stand a chance against this vile and powerful nemesis? No, common sense must be ignored in a situation like this. Even if there's only a 1 in a billion chance of victory, that means that there is also a 1 in a billion opportunity of turning the tables completely. Will Lucas, Kumatora, and Duster be separated once again, or will they work together again to overcome the obstacles that stand in their way? From the flying ship, a masked man looks down upon Lucas and friends, his profile still very youthful. The tale now moves to its next chapter, with an almost certain promise of battles far more intense than ever before. If we can summarize the arc so far, we've seen this world be established, we've seen it change in terrifying new ways, and now we know the enormity of what we're up against. What comes next? It's simple. We need to take the whole system down. But before we can address that, where are we? When we regain consciousness after our fall, all we see at first is the sky, some clouds gently waving back and forth in the sun. As the camera pans down, we see that after falling to what should have been our certain death, we instead awake in an endless expanse of sunflowers as far as the eye can see. Sunflowers, as we know from inspecting the sunflowers at Hinawa's gravesite, are our mother's favorite flower. This whole section plays like a dream. The horizon ripples in the background, which is a nice touch considering this game is on the GBA. After we wander for a while, something catches our eye. It's not literally there, but it's a vision of the past that we can just see through squinted eyes. We see a room rendered in black and white with a sunflower waving in the breeze in the corner. It's not clear to us what this is specifically, but it feels significant. We hear someone call our name. Lucas. After a while, we're reunited with Boney and keep wandering through the field of sunflowers, and then eventually we both catch a glimpse of our mother. As we see her, she walks just out of our view, and we follow her. This whole section is handled without any words at all. For as talkative as Mother 3 is over most of its length, its key emotional touches are a lot more restrained. The madcap, quirky energy takes its time to settle down when it should, and welcomes a quieter mood with a lower word count when that's the right choice. Itoi has the confidence to know when his story beats will be interesting enough to retain the RPG player's interest without textual prompting. Certain games, inspired by the Mother series, increase the word count when trying to make an emotional point. Not to pick on Undertale specifically, but I'm going to. The final hallway scene in Undertale, which is a game that takes massive, if not direct, conceptual inspiration from Mother, it's good, but it's also wordy. The hallway itself is serviceable. The words, and to Toby Fox's credit, the music, combine to tell a lot of the story there. Again, I'm not just trying to pick on Undertale. I'm sure you'll find a lot of JRPGs of Days Gone that were actually Mother's contemporaries were a lot more dependent on telling rather than showing. But it's all just to praise Mother 3 all the more. It's able to show so much without a single word here. All of this contrast is just to say I appreciate Mother 3's confidence in guiding you to these endless, dreamy sunflower fields and trusting that you'll follow the sense of distance and grief that Lucas is feeling. The nostalgia and pain here as Lucas walks through the sunflowers can just be felt so crisply. And in the midst of this dreamy haze, we see our mother one more time, just out of reach. If only we could just reach out. But we can't. She's gone. But miraculously, somehow, Wes and Alec are waiting for us down below. They've stacked a pile of hay for some reason, and it just so happens to be in just the right spot to safely cushion Boney and Lucas's falls. And so ends Chapter 6. It's Mother 3's shortest chapter, but one of its most memorable, and certainly one of its most iconic. Chapter 7, The Seven Needles. I hope you've packed your nut bread and double jerky, because Chapter 7 is the longest in Mother 3 by far. There are 8 chapters in Mother 3, and this chapter, The Seven Needles, marks the start of our checklisty quest around the world. You know, the equivalent of Mother 1 and 2 having you go around the world collecting the 8 pieces of your melody. The difference is that in Mother 3, this checklist begins in the 7th chapter of an 8-chapter game, rather than right at the start. All of this put together results in a Mother 3 that isn't symmetrical in structure, but still very deliberate. Chapters are weighted and paced to get you feeling and doing exactly what the game wants you to be doing at any given time. Why don't we characterize each chapter for a second? Chapter 1 is our introduction to the world and the inciting tragedy of losing our mother. Chapter 2 is the rising action and more world building. Chapter 3 shifts our perspective to the villains and gives us a compelling introduction to Lucas as a hero. Chapter 4, Lucas gets the band back together, and Chapter 5, we try to stick it to the man and fail. Chapter 6 is a compressed reflection on our defeat. And now Chapter 7 is our final push back up the mountain. And we need to get the band back together again. A little note here, the pile of hay that Alex stacked up to cushion Boney and Lucas's fall wasn't there by chance. Seems like Hinawa reached out to Alec in a dream. That implies that there was some element of reality to the visions that we were seeing in the sunflower fields. It wasn't just all in our heads. It had some touch point with reality and was able to reach Alec to save us. We've been separated from Kumatora and Duster, and to push us in the right direction toward finding them, Alec recommends we go talk to his friends the Magypsies. Thankfully, we don't have to look very far because Ionia has been tied up right outside the retirement home on this bridge. Looks like they were bullying Ionia for being different. We have to make it upriver so that Ionia can check on Aeolia. She also makes reference to us being the one, and that the time is drawing near. More exposition on this to come in a few. But our immediate objective is to get upriver, which is a problem because we don't have a boat. Thankfully, these 2 guys in crew uniforms who've been doing rowing animations this entire conversation have just the solution for us. We can add the so-called greatest boat ever to the list of creative transportation modes in the Mother series. Another minor touch on the way up the river is that we see that the bridge that connects the town square of Tasmally to the eastern part of the village is now a vertical lift bridge that's powered and motorized. This is just another development that shows how much things have changed in Tasmally. So we make our way upriver and try to find our way to Aeolia's house. But if you listen very carefully in this part, you can actually hear a waltz rhythm. So we meet back up with Aeolia, and Ionia gets untied. Ionia tidies up in the mirror, but then as she's straightening up her makeup, we hear a sharp, shimmering sound, followed by a violent shake of the earth. And then, Aeolia starts disappearing. Someone has pulled Aeolia's needle, whatever that means. All we know from what Aeolia is saying is that her needle in Osohe Castle has been pulled. This is the artifact that we saw from the balcony earlier in the courtyard in Chapter 2. And this means that someone who's been able to pull them has appeared, whatever that means, and that this will herald the awakening of the Dark Dragon. Putting 2 and 2 together, the teaser at the start of Chapter 7 showed the masked man and the pig mask entering Osohe Castle. All of this is very foreboding, and it's worth noting that things are stirring up into action in Chapter 7 before we reunite with our team. This impresses the feeling on you that things are starting to escalate and get out of hand, and that Lucas and Boney are sort of on their own to deal with it. It sure would be nice to have some friends right now. We make our way through the underground passageway that connects Aeolia's house to Osohe, and for some reason it's Egyptian themed. Fine with me. We find that the needle in the courtyard has been pulled, and out from where it sat is a plume of some kind of purple energy. This is described as not being particularly evil, but empty. Ionia doesn't feel anything here at all. No heart of good or evil. Because of what the game tipped us off to, showing us the masked man in the Chapter 7 teaser, this clues us in that the masked man is heartless. It seems that if someone like Facade pulled the needle, we would definitely sense some sort of malice. Not that someone like Facade could pull the needle, because it seems like PK love is a prerequisite for being able to do so. So this is where Ionia gives us an exposition dump on the history of the Nowhere Islands, the Dark Dragon, and the overall mythology of this world. First, know this, these are specially protected islands. We reside upon these islands together with a limitless power. That power is the dragon that sleeps in the darkness under the islands. The dragon is incredibly large, about as large as all these islands put together. At this point, you might look in the background and notice that the islands are clearly dragon-shaped. There's a head down to the south and 2 wings on the sides of the mountain. Because the dragon is asleep, these islands are protected from disaster, but its power is too great for humans to control. It was for this reason that our ancient Magypsy ancestors placed 7 needles in the dragon to make it sleep. 1 needle for each Magypsy. For a very, very long time, we have continued to guard the needles, but it has been told that someone to wake the dragon will appear when its power is needed. However, if the one who needs the dragon's power has a heart of evil, that power will obey all that is evil. It's very possible that everything could be completely destroyed simply to satisfy wicked ambition. On the other hand, the exact opposite is what we hope for. If a person with a heart of good pulls the dragon's needles and uses its power, the fate of all evil will be washed away, and all life as we know it will shine brightly. That is what is told. Finally, listen to this, but don't worry. When each of our 7 needles is pulled, we Magypsies will cease to be. Our millennia-long lives over. Isn't that just romantic of us? That's a very interesting closing line there. Isn't that romantic? It seems like the Magypsies view this life cycle of theirs of guarding the needles and then disappearing when the time comes as some sort of romantic process. I have a few things to say about this scene, and it definitely won't be the end of our discussion about the Dark Dragon and the mechanics of Mother 3's world, but a few things are established here. One of them is that this is definitely not Earth as we know it. Mother 3 world has sort of been kept vague and abstract for now, but now we have very concrete details that are very large in their implications. We're literally on the back of a dark dragon, a dragon who represents the limitless power of the Earth. And that's the second thing I want to touch on here, is that it seems the dragon represents the inexhaustible and infinitely dangerous power of nature in the world. And what is at stake is what sort of heart is going to hold the reins of that power. We get a phone call on a pigmass transceiver that's been left on the ground. Thankfully, the pigmass are incompetent enough to give us nudges in the right direction. They tell us that the next needle has been located near the Chimera Lab and that we should head there right away, and that the monkey is the key. Ionia then points us toward a shortcut back to Tasmally and floats off in the breeze. You know, it's funny, Ionia also told us not too long ago that she couldn't fly. So on our way back to Tasmally, the shortcut spits us out in the graveyard. Boney catches a whiff of our dad, but it seems like we've just missed him. Nippolite is standing at our mother's grave. Seems like our father left something for us. The courage badge. He can give us a token of courage, but he's not here with us. Nippolite tells us that all our father does these days is go into the mountains looking for Klaus, come back to visit Hinoa's grave, repeat. Nippolite makes a very insightful observation, which is that Lucas needs to be his father's salvation. Obviously, it's too much to ask of Lucas, or anyone in Lucas's position, but it's true that Flint will never be able to find closure looking for answers in the marble of his wife's tombstone, or out in the mountains looking for the body of his son. In reality, when a person goes missing and isn't found for a few days, then that person is usually either deceased or enduring a fate worse than death. Part of Flint's mission is to confirm what exactly happened to Klaus, just so that he can try to find a resolution of some sort. But we have to think of his actions of going searching for Klaus in the mountains as being equivalent to him mourning at this gravesite. They're both acts of mourning. Flint's grieving process is obsessive. It's not his fault, but it's how he handles it. The grieving that we see Lucas do is closer to what we might consider the ideal way to handle grief. It's still incredibly painful, but the moments that we see with Lucas are more so those moments when you're caught up in daily life and you haven't thought about that person you've lost for a while, and then maybe you hear their favorite song, or you see a car that looks like the one they used to drive, or you smell something that reminds you of how they smelled, and then it all just comes rushing back. I'm thinking of the moments of Lucas in the mirror at the start of Chapter 4, or remembering his mother telling him to change out of his pajamas. Lucas still goes about his daily life, but he's emotionally open enough to feel these moments when they happen, and continuing to move forward carrying them. This might be a good opportunity to talk about the video game again, huh? Chapter 7 opens things up in a big way. It's the only part of the game that I would say is truly non-linear. Just about everything else in Mother 3 has you going along a pretty narrow course, but Chapter 7 you have a few options of where you can go. You're encouraged to go to the Chimera Lab first, but the map is wide open, and by this point you've explored pretty much all of it in the previous chapters. So it's up to you if you want to just run around the map, see how things have changed in Tasmally, which, of course, there are always more and more changes, nothing quite so dramatic as the jump to Chapter 4, but things have continued to move forward. Or you can choose to take another substantial diversion before heading to the Chimera Lab, which is what we're doing right now. We follow a very suspiciously bow-tie-themed clue in the graveyard to a very suspiciously bow-tie-themed coffee table, which functions much like a pork bean that doesn't need to be recharged. What a feat of engineering. Who could have built such a thing? Of course, it's the Mr. Saturns. We're headed to Saturn Valley. We approach the limits of the pigmass construction of the highway at the far southeast extreme of the map. Filtering in through those trademark Earthbound UFO sounds, we hear the Mr. Saturn theme starting to break through. Entering Saturn Valley this late in the game is sort of like catching up with an old friend you haven't seen in many years. And when we encounter a pig mask on our path in, it's like seeing that old friend has just gotten a face tattoo. If we talk to the pigmass captain at the entrance, his reaction to and perception of this place is pretty much the opposite of what we would feel finally remembering the Saturns from Earthbound. I don't get it. I don't care. It's stupid. And this is just yet another reference to Earthbound that's being pulled in, but in a context that's altered and wrong. When we first visit Saturn Valley in Mother 3, it's under attack by pigmass and by flatulence. While we choke through this indescribable smell that's lingering in the air, why don't I try to describe what I'm doing with the sequence in this playthrough. Normally we'd be going to the Chimera Lab right now. After that, we'd meet up with Kumatora, but that's after a somewhat lengthy section of gameplay in the lab. What I'm doing instead is going to Saturn Valley first. The enemies are tougher here, but we can reunite with Duster right at the beginning of this area before completing the rest of it. My thinking is that I'd like to get my party back together as soon as possible so that everybody gets the benefit of experience from the battles for as many battles as possible. I'm probably overthinking this. In fact, I know I am because I've played this game before and didn't need to do this. And also the way that experience rewards scale in this game sort of makes there be diminishing returns from the raw quantity of battles that you're facing. My personal preference with games like these is to grind as little as possible, but if doing so for a burst of time will make things easier for me down the road, I'm willing to do it. And that's what I'm doing here. The pigmass in Saturn Valley are kind of too strong for me at the stage that we're at right at the beginning of Chapter 7, so I took some time to grind some experience in the cave. I would say that unlike the grinding in the attic in Chapter 4, this grinding is not necessary whatsoever, and it's just something I chose to do to pursue the sequence I chose. Again, that sequence is to rescue Duster before going to the Chimera Lab or the Snowcap Mountain. The pigmass weapon of choice for torturing Duster and the Mr. Saturns, and the Rope Snake, who's here too, is the Frightbot, a terrifying machine whose purpose is to tell scary stories, which must be like Saturn kryptonite. Even with the benefit of some grinded out levels here, we need to get creative to come out on top in this fight. I'm using PK Flash and hoping to clear off at least one or two of these enemies with the insta-kill potential. Eventually, we engineer a win through this fight and save Duster. At this point, we could go on through the rest of the Fire Mountain area through Saturn Valley, but we're going to pay a visit to the Chimera Lab first to get Kumatora back in our party and get the whole gang back together again. It is a very long journey back because this isn't exactly the intended route, so I'm going to skip ahead to save us some time. On our way back, we might notice a suspicious ritual door near the Chimera Lab. As we're standing near it, we get a call from the pigmask who tipped us off to the Chimera Lab's needle in the first place. As if speaking from a sixth sense, he tells us that the needle we're after is on the other side of this very door, and that we need a monkey to help us open it. Having seen Salsa dance the door in Osohei Open before, we know that Salsa is our key through this door. One of our part-time coworkers from the factory earlier recognizes us and lets us into the Chimera Lab. As we walk through the door, the camera pans up to show us a horrifying creature that's been plastered as some form of decoration or maybe security on the front edifice. This is just one of many indications of the brutal things done at this lab. Let's talk about the Nazis for a second. Hey, why not? The parallel is drawn by the game explicitly in that the Pigmas salute with the same salute the Nazis did. They're also a totalitarian empire, and part of their MO is to scapegoat people who won't fall in line and relocate a lot of the residents of Tasmally. Yet another facet of the Nazis mirrored by the Pigmas are the particularly horrific experiments done at concentration camps. I don't think I'm reaching for this comparison because the game draws so many explicit parallels between the Pigmas and the Nazis. So one of the parallels that this section makes clear is how brutality can be concealed behind bureaucracy and hierarchy. All the Pigmas here are just showing up for an average day at work for them, but this is our first time looking at this place. We see it with fresh eyes. We're going to get to see how the proverbial sausage is made. There's a lot to see here that elaborates on the cruel exploitation the Pigmas have been carrying out over the course of the entire game. We see creatures of all shapes and sizes being penned in, waiting to be butchered and sewn back together. There are displays of the skeletons of many of these chimeras that we've already been familiar with fighting over the course of the game. A lot is implied in the laboratory section visually. It's very easy to envision what goes on here in these rooms with the simple visual details we're given. After exploring some, we locate Salsa and Samba, but they're terrified by our Pigmas disguises, so they run off out of our grasp. Get ready for a wild monkey chase. Salsa, being the savvy X-player controlled character that he is, isn't going down without a fight, and he knows how to effectively leverage the chaos caused by the escape of a certain ultimate chimera that's broken loose and is terrorizing the facility. You might recognize this fella as a stage hazard from one of Super Smash Bros.' most laughably, impractically huge stages, New Pork City. If you run afoul of the ultimate chimera in Mother 3, it bites your head off, killing you instantly if you come in contact. This mixes up the gameplay for this section, almost makes it like a cross between Alien and Metal Gear. And of course, I mean in how it feels, there's no real depth to the stealth here. And thankfully, our time dealing with these insta-kill stealth mechanics is mercifully short. Closing in on Salsa, we corner him in a room in the eastern part of the facility. Unfortunately, the ultimate chimera corners us immediately after. In the chaos, trying to avoid the chimera, it causes us to lose our Pigmas regalia, and Salsa recognizes us as the people who saved him so many years ago. When the chips are down and it seems like the party's out of options, and Dr. Andonut suggests using Boney as bait, Salsa heroically leaps onto the ultimate chimera's back and flips its off switch. Good monkey. Beautiful. What goes around comes around, and Lucas's good deed has now paid its dividend. We regroup and make our way out of the Chimera Lab, but as we leave, we get a horror movie-like sting where the canary perched on the ultimate chimera's head chirps to life and confidently flicks the chimera's power back on. Of course the ultimate chimera has an entire chimerized organism dedicated to flipping a single switch. It is ultimate after all. If you have an off switch, you'd better be able to flip it back on. I comment on this because it's a great gag, and it sells the ultimate perfection of this chimera in the silliest way possible. And it also means that the chimera will remain on the prowl. Hopefully it'll bring down this whole lab on its own. At the familiar looking door we've passed several times already earlier in the game, we get to assume control of Salsa one last time for a final, glorious monkey dance. At the ironic risk of repeating myself because I've said this already, Mother 3 makes effective use of repetition, with respect both to things it wants you to take seriously and things it wants you to laugh at. This is our third time seeing the monkey dance. We saw Wes do it, we've done it before as Salsa, and now we're doing it one more time for Lucas to push him forward on the last leg of his journey. Dance, monkey, dance. This is gratuitous in the most charming way possible. There's no reason that the act of opening a door needs to be such an ordeal, but it's so fun that they decided to make it one in making this game. We meet up with Doria, who echoes the sentiment Ionia expressed before, that the time is drawing near. Oh hey Kumatora, good to have you back. Our permanent party is now whole again, and will remain so for basically the rest of the game. Doria's needle is located in this pool of water to the left. In order to pull it, we'll need to somehow transfer the water from the left hole into the right hole. Doria suggests that someone or something at the Chimera Lab might be up to the task. When we check in with Dr. Andonuts, he offers us 3 methods of draining the water, 2 of which are useless. Real quick, I want to touch on the fact that Dr. Andonuts is here. We kind of brushed over him at the Chimera Lab. At this stage, we know basically nothing about why he's here, but like many of the other elements that are carried over directly from Earthbound, it kind of feels like he shouldn't be here. He introduces us to the Bucket Brothers, who are by far the funniest choice of these 3. I mean, just look at this. This serves 0 purpose, but is very memorable, and Mother 3 is just packed of moments like this. Things that don't serve a purpose, but are just a joy to experience. And though they all separately seem silly, all of these little funny moments add up to the central picture that Mother 3 is trying to paint, which, in broad strokes, is a picture of a world where what's important is finding the joy in life with your friends and your family, rather than climbing the highest mountains, living forever, or achieving the highest possible power. Anyways, after draining the pond for real, we can finally pluck Doria's needle. We pull the needle from the ground, a flash of light, and then we experience the same rumbling that we felt from a distance before. And then, Doria starts to disappear. Doria reiterates that she's not sad about this, and nor should we be. The time has come, the time for change, the time for us to pass the contents of our hearts onto the Dark Dragon. This marks the 2nd needle that's been pulled. So far, the Masked Man has pulled 1, and we've pulled 1. There are 5 to go. After pulling the needle, we wish Salsa and Samba goodbye at Doria's house, and then we head out and encounter our old rival from back in the prologue, the first enemy we ever fought, the Mole Cricket. He reads us accidentally bumping into him here as us finally paying back the challenge that he threw down so many years ago for a rematch. He spent the last 3 years training in the Mole Cricket equivalent of the hyperbolic time chamber, so he is more than ready to lay the paint on us for round 2. He reveals the Mole Cricket hideout and lets us down, further cementing the ridiculousness of this scene. If we open the present to the east, we get a little fireworks show. Lovely. This is the sort of animation touch that you wouldn't see in Earthbound. Too dynamic. There were fireworks inside. Also, I just feel like pointing this out. The Mole Cricket hole is located right at the bottom of the cliff that we started Chapter 5 on. It wouldn't be a YouTube video analyzing video games if I didn't draw a comparison to Dark Souls. That moment of realizing these 2 places were connected in a way I didn't expect reminded me of Dark Souls. Another such moment was realizing that the passage we were traveling through in Chapter 3 led to the shortcut in the graveyard in Tasmally. After much posturing and puffery, including a warning from the wise Mole Cricket Elder, the fight is on. And then it's over just about as quickly as it began. I mean, he is just a Mole Cricket after all. After proving ourselves, we're given the go-ahead to pass through the Mole Cricket's labyrinthine home on our way to the next Magypsy's house. This maze is likely to get you running around in circles, getting lost, doubling back, rinsing, and repeating. A Mole Cricket gives you the advice that if you turn at every opportunity, then you'll get to the end eventually. This is technically true of any maze. If you just keep repeatedly turning in the same direction, you will eventually find your way to the end. For me, even having played the game before, this part still takes a little bit of trial and error to navigate. But even this drain on your time serves a purpose. As you wind through these pointless loop-de-loops, you can't help but wonder what the Mole Crickets who dug them were thinking. Not in a serious lore kind of way, but in a funny way, because we know that the Mole Crickets are very prideful and they do everything with great intensity and seriousness. So these pointless loops we have to surmise have some point. We just can't tell what it is. When we finally get to the end of the maze, we tumble into a series of much shorter hallways with no more branching paths. You can feel the anticipation build as you bolt through these rooms faster and faster, building momentum to the ultimate reveal of the surface at the end. And what a reveal it is. Man, the relief and excitement on reaching the snow-dusted surface and having that familiar snowman/winters theme that is a fan favorite from the Mother series start playing. Great moment. Because we were talking about level design a second ago, why don't we compare Mother 3's Snowcap Mountain with its counterpart in Earthbound, Winters? Mother 3's snowy area, by comparison, is much smaller, and it's a much straighter shot from beginning to end. That last point about the route being a straight shot is broadly applicable to all of Mother 3's maps. Now, some of this is certainly a consequence of the GBA format, the screen size, everything's more zoomed in, but I'm sure it's also related to the difference in geographic focus between Earthbound and Mother 3. Earthbound spiced its world up with variety and scope of the places that you visit in a sprawling, goofy world, which feels as large as our own. Mother 3 is more narrowly set on one archipelago. The geographic focus, much like the literal camera, is zoomed in. It's more important that you see and understand Tazmily so that you can mourn for how it changes over time. This heightened focus on Tazmily and the surrounding areas works to Mother 3's advantage most of the time, but one side effect of this focus is that single-use areas like the Snowcap mountain here can feel shorter and more straightforward than their Earthbound counterparts. On entering Lydia's house, we find her tending to an injured pig mask inside. Now this is some more important characterization for the Magypsies here. While they seem detached, that really helps them be objective and kind to others regardless of who they are. But it seems like this kindness might have allowed the masked man to beat us to the punch. He's already pulled the next needle when we go farther up the mountain to the north. Staring at the masked man, we feel a twisted pang of familiarity, implemented in a green tint over the screen. But rather than fight us himself, the masked man calls over a chimerized mech-gorilla to fight us in his stead. After all, the masked man already pulled the needle. What does he have to stick around for? He's not in it for pride. We know he has no heart. This mech-gorilla can be tough. He's likely to stomp us into fresh-driven snow if we're not strategic. Lucky for us, we are being strategic. Typically, by this section, you won't have Duster in your party, but we went and got him early, so we have an advantage right there. PK Thunder is also effective against the gorilla, but if you hit him more than twice with it, it'll actually power him up, so avoid doing that. When the fight is over, Lydia starts to disappear, and she notes that someone else besides us has been pulling the needles, the masked man. She insists that we must be the ones to pull the rest of the needles, otherwise the consequences could be grave. She gives us her memento as she leaves. We also picked one up from the other Magypsies who disappeared. The Magypsy mementos are basically a one-time use revive item that will bring you back to life when you're about to hit a game over. The mementos are useful, but remember what I've explained about the loading system. They'll kind of just use themselves up when you take enough damage, and, if you lose the fight after that, your memento is gone. So, it's hard to strategize around it. Just brute forcing the problem is still, unfortunately, the best solution for gameplay-related concerns. The pig mask that Lydia took care of is feeling better. Even though Lydia's gone, it seems like her benevolence lives on. This character also shows us that the pig masks are people too. Whoever's at the top is probably manipulating them. It's manipulation all the way down. So, with no more needle left to pull up here, it's time to leave Snowcap Mountain. Lydia tells us that we can take the white box on the adjacent peak, and as we make the hike up the mountain opposite, our sprites become incredibly tiny, reminiscent of how we got real small in the Lost Underworld in Earthbound to represent the scale. We round the top of the peak and get in a mysterious white box and zoom off the mountain to some inspirational travel music. Oh yeah, it's like a ski jump. We soar through the air for a very long time and then eventually land back in Tazmily Cemetery, where we get a clearer picture of the white box as it crashes into the ground. Yep, it was a refrigerator that we were all piled up in like a clown car. Taking a page out of the Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull playbook, I see. Let's talk about Mother 3's modes of transportation again, because the refrigerator is yet another item on the growing list. Mother 3 uses devices like refrigerator ski jumps to get around teleportation. There is no teleporting in Mother 3, and that's good for a few reasons. One, it means the game is designed to not have you backtrack very much. In Earthbound, teleportation was necessary as a quality of life feature because of how many times we would need to revisit locations over huge distances. And that made sense for Earthbound because part of the point was the scale of the world, and the teleportation was implemented well. You needed a proper landing strip size space to initiate a very unique and kinetic teleport. Mother 3's world, by contrast, is physically smaller than Earthbound's. So teleportation has less benefit inherently, but omitting teleports probably encouraged the developers to create more fun and interesting ways to cover huge distances. For example, the refrigerator ski jump. From having you change characters to using different modes of transportation, Mother 3 keeps you moving from new area to new area at a steady clip and usually with an accompanying unique way to ride. You see, I'm talking about how gracefully Mother 3 moves you from one part of the map to the other, but I'm now realizing that I left my coffee table on the other side of the map while we were being clever getting Duster early, so we're gonna have to make that very, very long journey back to Saturn Valley entirely on foot. Now that Duster is free, the Saturns are out and goofing around in force. Fire Mountain is above the cliff. It turns out the Saturns knew where the place was all along and they were just holding out on the pigmass. Even under the intense torture of scary stories, the Saturns hold their ground. I just love these guys. A group of Mr. Saturns demonstrate their best-in-class stacking skills, and with their powers combined with Duster's wall staples, we're able to make our way to the top of the cliff. Good job, everybody. We move on to Phrygia's house, and Phrygia is one of my favorite Magypsies. Early on in the game, she's been one of the Magypsies who seemed the most aloof, the one who expressed indifference to Klaus's safety back in Chapter 1. And true to bizarre form, this time Phrygia is asleep when we meet her, but conveniently she wrote everything she could possibly have to say about where we need to go next on a signpost at the foot of her bed. As part of the information on the sign, we learn some encouraging words that we can recite to coax the boulders to the north out of the way, cheering them up. The boulder appears to feel better. After a mini slide puzzle, we enter Fire Mountain proper, where we get a good amount of combat. The enemies in this area are predictably fire-themed. There are ice enemies in the snow area who are weak to fire, there are fire enemies here who are weak to ice. When we eventually go underwater, PK Thunder will work wonders. Sometimes, Mother 3 is criticized for giving Duster more to do than Kumatora. You know, because we spend more playable time as Duster as our playable character than we do as Kumatora, and because Duster tends to do more in the overworld, like what we just saw with the wall staples. But consider that Kumatora really shines with the obvious elemental combat in Chapter 7. She's not exactly a subtle person either. She's a bruiser, a fighter. This is appropriate for character. Making our way to the Needle, we catch our first glimpse of the new and improved Facade after his nasty tumble off the top of Thunder Tower in Chapter 5. Now, he needs an interpreter to speak to us at all. He's become a chimera himself. That the cruel, bold Facade who loves to laugh at us now has to speak through a very flat, businesslike, robotic interpreter is pretty fitting. The fight against Facade is tough, but it's still nothing compared to the jealous base from before. We've never actually fought Facade before he was injured. Normally, enemies have their less detailed overworld sprite, which runs around the map, and then a more detailed sprite for battles. What this means for us here is that our first time up close and personal with Facade, he's already mutilated, chimerized, and thirsting for revenge against us specifically through his beady eyes. You could compare Facade's function in Mother 3 to the Mani Mani statues in Earthbound, not in terms of what they represent, but more in terms of their role as a recurring secondary big bad. The Mani Mani statue and Facade both harass you over the course of the game, but while the Mani Mani statue is more mysterious and abstract, Facade is a literal antagonist given his due face time over the course of the story. You up close and personally receive Facade's cruelty as Salsa. By this point, there's enough antagonistic tension with Facade built up to make this fight satisfying. We put Facade in his place and get to pull the needle for ourselves this time. That makes 4 out of 7 needles pulled. The score in the series for the end of the world is currently 2-2. I should also add that each needle that Lucas is pulling himself grants him 1 additional upgrade to his PK Love ability. The one that we pulled at Doria's place gave us PK Love Beta, and now we learn PK Love Delta. You know how I was praising Mother 3's lack of a teleport not too long ago? Well, now I'm forced to eat my words a little bit, because we don't have any other choice except to walk all the way back out of the volcano the way we came. And this involves fighting a bunch of stupid enemies after we've already fought a challenging boss. You might be tempted to just let them kill you so you can start at your last save, and I wouldn't hold it against you. Returning to Saturn Valley, we find that the tunnel has been bombed off by the pigmass, so we're trapped here. But, thankfully, the Mr. Saturns agree to help us build a flying machine if we can just find the last component piece of their master contraption. And that last component we need is just a bird. Those birds that we've probably bumped into and have certainly scared off a couple times on our way in and out of the valley now have a chance to do us some good. After capturing a bird, we have enough thrust to propel the Saturn flying machine into the air. But to give them some time to assemble it, we can get in a very familiar hot spring to enjoy a very familiar cup of coffee in a new context. The text crawl thing is a device that Earthbound pretty much kept relegated to the coffee break. In Mother 3, we've already had numerous coffee break-like sequences, but now this one is a direct echo from the iconic one from Mother 2. But the purpose is the same. It's to spur the player on in the latter part of their journey, on through the final sections of tough gameplay, to see the story through to its conclusion, and to remind us of what's important and how we got here. No one is simply born strong. People only grow stronger little by little, by encountering difficult situations, learning not to run from them, no matter how frightening or daunting they may be. Lucas, that is exactly what you have done to grow strong. However, you did not do it for yourself. You grew strong for those you would otherwise be unable to help. They are the reason you are strong. Even now, you occasionally show a glimpse of it, Lucas. Fleeting images of that once pampered, crybaby boy can sometimes be seen in your smile. You've come a very long way. There's no telling what to expect from here on out, but if one thing is certain, it's that those who believe in you will be right there to help. Trust in them. Now go forth toward whatever stands out the most in your eyes. Go, facing not the darkness, but the light. Lucas and his companions, you have driven the enemy into a corner. The enemy's back is to the wall. There is nothing to fear now. Everyone is watching on, with complete faith in you. In their hearts, they all say, "Thank you." Can you hear them? One thing that this coffee break does is call attention to Lucas used to having been a crybaby boy, and look how far he's come. He wouldn't be the hero he was today, if not for him starting out so vulnerable and coming so far as a result. Relax and filled with renewed purpose, we're ready to fly on the birdcage back to Tasmania at the polar extreme of the map. As we're getting out of the hot spring, a Mr. Saturn asks if he can have our courage badge. He'll give it back to us, he promises. Okay, here you go. With a renewed purpose, we prepare to make our journey on the flying birdcage. But before we cast off, the rope snake puts himself forth one more time, one more chance to prove himself. Maybe reluctantly, maybe apathetically, or maybe just because we're so fired up from the coffee break, we allow the rope snake to try to tow us back to Tasmania. Okay, we have liftoff. Good luck, brave little rope snake. And with that, we're off to the west in search of the next needle on Tanetane Island. Everyone is barely hanging on for dear life to the birdcage. Boney is clinging on to Lucas's shorts and causing his shorts to slip down below his bottom. It looks like the Coppertone baby. After some suspenseful bobbing up and down below the clouds and some sounds of struggle from the rope snake, we wonder, did he make it? Did he hold his grip? No, he didn't. He didn't. This proves to be devastating to the rope snake's self-esteem when we talk to him later. We kerplunk into the water near Tasmania, no worse for wear. The background music has changed in a couple ways. It's lazier, it's taken on a more beachy theme, and it's also touched with a bit of sadness to reflect the fact that many of our neighbors have now picked up and left for the big city. The ones who remain are all talking about doing the same thing. Some pig mass flippers oriented toward the sea and a helpful crab indicated with an arrow all tell us that we should get in the water. Our path to Tanetane Island lies at the bottom of the ocean. Yep, we're gonna walk. Gu Lagoon, the underwater world. So begins the long, breathless trek to Tanetane Island. We're constantly losing oxygen underwater, and the Mother 3 equivalent to the Sonic the Hedgehog air bubbles are these half handsome man, half chimera robot things called oxygen refill machines. They refill your oxygen by giving you a big smooch and literally filling your lungs up with oxygen. Okay. Mother 3 also leans into the weirdness by making these animations agonizingly long. You will appreciate your emulator's fast-forward function here. Be careful with your hotkeys, though, or you might accelerate the game past your own watery demise and run out of oxygen at an inopportune moment. Like I said before, Kumatora's lightning really shines underwater against the navy squeals and other underwater fauna that we fight. We find a secret deep within a tunnel that risks us running out of oxygen if we don't do it just right. But we go all the way down and we find a prepared piece of sushi called a fish roe man. This is a good gag. It feels like you're pursuing the ancient secrets of the deep, only to find a feast of finely prepared and cut sushi. Our reward for defeating the Roe Man Emperor is this awesome crown, which is a suitably awesome reward for our troubles. In general, I find underwater sections in video games to be less fun than their landlocked counterparts, and I know I'm not alone here in this. Mother 3's Ocean Walk segment is no exception. I'm still not a fan of bobbing slowly across the ocean floor, pausing frequently for smooch breaks. I can give this section some credit, though, for changing up the gameplay and giving us the Navy squeals, and really selling how much of a journey it is to make it all the way to Tanetane Island. At the south extreme of the sea, we're suddenly sucked into a fight with Master Eddy. An eddy is a circular current of water, which is what this is. We're sucked into a whirlpool. But unfortunately, this fight is not just a pun, it's also a fight you are scripted to lose, which I'm really not a fan of in general, but there's not much room here to misinterpret what's happening, because you basically go through the fight as normal, and then at the very, very end, Master Eddy insta-kills your entire party. We get him down to the ropes, but then he sweeps us up in a cyclone with the last of his strength, spitting us back up onto land, precisely where we needed to get, on Tanetane Island. Our party is now down to 1 HP, and with no PP left to heal. There's a zombie shroom blocking our way also, so we have no choice but to eat the mushrooms labeled as energizing mushrooms. We can see where this is going. Maybe we'd better save by talking to this save frog who's been eaten but not yet digested by a snake, within the belly of the beast, apt for what we're about to experience. So, the 3 humans in our party eat a whole truckload worth of psilocybin mushrooms in order to heal. Okay, so where do you start with this scene? It's probably one of the biggest reasons Nintendo is reluctant to localize Mother 3, more so than the Magypsies, I would reckon. It's one thing to have mythical creatures in your game that evoke trans people in ways that maybe aren't entirely congruent with today's norms, but it's another thing altogether to have Lucas, Ness from Undertale from Smash Bros. Little brother, eat a fistful of Schedule 1 hallucinogenic fungus. The only way to pull off a straight-up psychedelic drug trip in a game like Mother 3 is to do it in a very motivated way for a specific purpose. And thankfully, Mother 3 does this. The mushroom trip on Tanetane Island is a really effective way to refocus on what we're really doing here. Ultimately, Lucas's most heartbreaking problems relate to the family that he's lost and to his own insecurities. The trip gives us a reason to reflect sharply on the central threads of the story and characters for a bit, rather than just have us plod on to our next needle and boss fight. This sequence is really memorable and makes me extra grateful for the fan translation team's efforts, because there's no doubt in my mind Nintendo would be bent toward compromising this scene in some way. I'm glad we got to experience this vivid bad trip in all its intended glory. Let's talk about psychedelic or magic mushrooms for a second. In real life, consuming psilocybin mushrooms induces a psychedelic state. This state is characterized by euphoria, heightened emotional sensitivity and awareness, visual hallucinations, and a host of other mental and emotional effects. All of these effects grow more intense at higher dosages. In practice, maybe at a lower dose, your surroundings will visually shimmer slightly. At a higher dose, you might see full-blown visual unrealities, even when your eyes are closed. Approximately 1.5 to 3.5 grams of dried mushrooms are enough to produce a significant psychedelic experience. More than that, and you're pushing into the furthest reaches of psychonautical exploration. At 5 grams and higher, the ego dissolves, thoughts become real, whispers will echo through your mind and take form, you will be laid completely bare. It's safe to say Lucas, Kumatora, and Duster have eaten way more than 5 grams of mushrooms each, considering that they eat enough to fully re-nourish from 1 HP. Consider that it's even more if you go back to the source to refill your health. Psychedelic experiences can be powerful and even traumatic. The docudrama series Wormwood details how a government researcher was unknowingly dosed with LSD, and it caused him to panic and potentially leap to his own death or potentially be assassinated by the CIA. We don't have to get into it, but the fact is these substances are extremely powerful even when you know what you're getting. When you aren't expecting an experience like this, it can be absolutely horrifying. Moving through the jungle, we're faced with members of our family and familiar faces from Tasmally. Mailboxes and trash cans we find with horrifying contents inside, like rat corpses. We meet Facade in a hot spring, and Boney refuses to follow us inside. Wonder why. Go to sleep in the absolute darkness. Touch my heart. See how it beats in and out? Lucas sees visions of his brother Klaus, both at the age he went missing and how old he would be now. Say, Lucas, what you up to? Our father threatens to beat us. He accuses us of doing something to our mother. Wes repeats to Duster, you're too scary. This captures the time loop or thought loop phenomenon that can occur on these substances. Mushrooms force the person taking them to feel the full brunt of all the emotions, fears, and insecurities lurking in the dark corners of their mind. Psilocybin is a very powerful substance. In my own limited experience on a far lower dose than Lucas is on, I've been reduced to a weeping mess at the sight of my girlfriend's face with my eyes closed. I remember it clearly, because of course you do in these circumstances. I was listening to Sigur Rós and their song Flugu Frelsarin. I was twisting myself in knots laughing, trying to pronounce the name of this song, and once I succeeded finally and could form the Icelandic phrase Flugu Frelsarin, which means a fly's savior, and I still make no claim to that pronunciation being correct, but it is at minimum a successful phonetic reading of that salad of letters, so I finally get Flugu Frelsarin out of my system, and I'm still sitting there with my senses and brain ignited. My frantic energy had run its course, and I was just left with the music and my own overwhelming emotions about 1,000 different things in my life, many of them mistakes and problems. You lose all cover in this state. All of your techniques at putting things off for later and saying, I'll worry about that later, you can't do it anymore. I closed my eyes, I saw her face, and I cried. Lucas's mother died in a very traumatic way 3 years ago, and that same series of events drove a wedge between Lucas and Duster's family and the rest of the community. Klaus hasn't been found. Lucas has been through so much tragedy. This sequence uses the gravity of a mushroom trip to thrust Lucas through an intense gauntlet of reflection. We are not just marching off to the next Magypsy. As we near the end of Mother 3, we're reminded of how much we've lost and those things about ourselves we'd least like to think about. The next Magypsy, Mixolydia, or Missy, does us the kindness of ending our bad trip from hell. Thank you, Missy. Wow, things look very different now that we're not tripping our balls off. The most memorable touch as we re-explore the jungle that we went through on mushrooms is to find that the hot spring we rested in earlier is actually a toxic waste dump that Boney was able to sniff out for what it was. Conveniently, behind a door, there is an actual hot spring that we can use to rest. Having emerged through the bad trip with our heads cleared, we can move through the caves to fight the barrier trio who are guarding the next needle. The barrier trio is one of the more difficult fights in the game. They swap between different elemental weaknesses. If you keep your status modifiers rolling, you should be able to weather this fight okay. The barrier trio even has at their disposal an ultimate psi technique, PK Starstorm. This one can hurt, but with enough shields and healing we can get by. The song that plays in this fight is called Strong One, and it's an example of how the challenge of Mother 3's rhythm battles escalates over the course of the game, compared to some of the simpler tunes from earlier where it's effortless to tap out a 16-hit combo. This one is very hard to even get a string of notes together for. The 15-8 time signature doesn't help either. Eventually, Lucas and the group beat Barrier Man, Barrier Gal, and Barrier Dude into submission. But before vanishing in a flash of light, the exhausted barrier trio strikes one final pose, and it is spectacular. But with the hard work done and the barrier trio defeated, the masked man simply swoops in to pull the rug out from under us by rolling out the red carpet for himself. He effortlessly strikes us down with his lightning and pulls the needle for himself. This is especially frustrating, and it proves to us that while we might be able to defeat Facade or even some of the strongest entities in Mother 3's world like the Barrier Trio, we are no match for the Masked Man, and until we have an answer to his lightning, we're going to continue to be thwarted. Defeated, that leaves the needle tally at 2 for us and 3 for the Masked Man, with 2 needles remaining. Given the logic of how this works, if the Masked Man pulls one more needle, that's game over. The world is reshaped in his empty image. Time is of the essence. We need to get back to the mainland as soon as possible. Thankfully, Ocho, the sailing octopus we met at Mixolydia's house, is up to the task. I like how you can see that taxi is written on the back of Ocho's head as Boney tries to scramble up. We get to watch a couple of the O2 machines punch out of their shift for the evening as we float on by. Job well done, fellas. Job well done. Maybe could do it a little faster, but who am I to complain? When we return to the shore of Tasmally Village, Bronson's sunburn is the least of what's changed. There's almost no one left here in the village anymore. By design, the slow drip of advances such as happy boxes and money have created an insatiable desire within people for more and more than Tasmally could ever provide. So, off in search of bigger and better things they go. Tasmally is like a ghost town now. It seems like the days of the whole town coming together to help our father look for our family so long ago. But we don't have time to get caught up in the sadness of all this. We have work to do. It's time to head north toward the final Magypsy that we know about, Ionia. Our journey north through the mountains is a treacherous one, and it takes us back through some of the earliest areas in the game. We can see that our grandfather's house has long since been destroyed by lightning if we head there. On our way through Argilla Pass, aka Stumble Pass, we stumble and drop the present of yummy pickles that we brought for Ionia. And we get a fun little aside as Boney, where we get to run around as the lovable brave dog and talk to our party members from his point of view for once. This is a fun little sequence, and the only time that we control Boney over the course of the game. It doesn't serve any purpose, like a lot of things in Mother 3, but I love this little sequence. Deep within the last simplistic cave dungeon crawl in Mother 3, we follow an outdoor path to an optional hidden chamber where we find the one and only Negative Man. This is a strange creature that just insults himself endlessly. I'm just a worthless protoplasm. Negative Man is one of Mother 3's funniest oddities, and his placement here just before the game takes a turn for the climactic is a smart bit of pacing. He just sits there and denigrates himself while you kill him. It's brilliant. You know, there are often many twists and turns and speed bumps along the way in the journey of purchasing something or deciding to watch or finally play something. For Mother 3, that journey took the following shape for me. Some of the earliest connective tissue is probably in the Pokemon Blue, Pokemon Yellow area, which I played a ton of on my Game Boy. Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, which I never finished but played the beginning of 100 times as a kid at my cousin's house, and of course the first Paper Mario game on the Nintendo 64. Those games all really opened my eyes to what games could do with humor and story. Somewhere over the years here, I'm introduced to Ness and Lucas via Super Smash Bros., but I never gave any serious thought to playing the Mother games themselves. Fast forward to high school, where I find out about Toby Fox and his Earthbound mod through his work on Homestuck. Fast forward a few years later, and I find the demo for Toby's debut game, Undertale. I enjoy the demo, and then the game comes out, and I love it. I love it so much, I want to play other games like Undertale. Games like Off, Lisa the Painful, and then of course eventually I come back to the Mother series, which inspired this particular appealing subgenre of games. After finishing Lisa the Joyful, which I love, it's better than Undertale, played Lisa, I still wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go back and play the Mother series proper, and wrestle with potentially dated gameplay mechanics. Bringing this tangent back on track, we find a way back to Negative Man. I saw a YouTube video of the Negative Man fight in Mother 3, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and motivated me to legally purchase the entire Mother series. So, God bless you, Negative Man. You may be a worthless protoplasm, and you may only give the party 3 experience when we beat you, but you were one of the final stops on my road to getting off my ass and downloading ROMs and translation patches legally, through legal methods. You know, this would be simpler if Nintendo just released Mother 3 globally, which they should do, but I digress. Our meeting with Ionia makes clear how grave the stakes are. The enemy is closing in on the last known needle, and the needle count is already at match point in their favor. To pull this off, we need a true and decisive win right here, and nothing short of us pulling this needle will do. Ionia gives us the waters of time that we'll need to get into Chupichupoyoi Temple. On our way leaving Ionia's house, we bump into a Mr. Saturn in disguise. He's polished our courage badge that we gave him back at the coffee break earlier into a Franklin badge that we'll recognize from all other games in the Mother series. As we know, the Franklin badge reflects lightning, and the Masked Man's lightning is the one edge that he's had over us. We are now armed with the boons that we'll need to take down the Masked Man and pull this needle. We trudge north to challenge the Pigmas as they futilely try to break into the temple without the blessings of the Magypsies. When the Clayman proves ineffective, the masked man throws a bomb to try to get the job done. Doesn't care that the Clayman's still there. I mean, he wasn't able to open the door. Of what use is he? This is just showing the Pigmas philosophy in practice of exactly how much value is placed on the lives and worth of others. Lucas and company are here to bring the pain and put a stop to all this. This is really a two-part boss battle that begins with a fight against two Pigmas majors in green and a Pigmas colonel in white, who's the highest ranking member of the Pigmas army we've yet encountered, excluding Facade and the masked man. We lay the pain on the Pigmas, which feels great, but quickly gives way to the oh no feeling of realizing we now have to fight Big Daddy Masked Man himself. As Lucas looks into the masked man's dead eyes, another sick wave of nostalgia washes over the screen. The masked man tries to insta-wipe our whole party again with his lightning and nearly succeeds if not for our Franklin badge. But instead, we knock his lightning right back at him, and this sets the stage for a fair fight with the Pigmas commander himself, the masked man. In this fight, it's confirmed firsthand for us now that the masked man, whoever he is able to wield PK Love. Specifically, this is Lucas and Klaus's favorite thing. This is another case of Mother 3 refusing to say outright what we all know to be true. It denies you the relief of just telling you who's under the mask. Of course you know, that's the point. The masked man shield killer makes keeping up any sort of viable defense a tough proposition in this fight. We have to do our best to manage our foe's offense and defense levels and keep ourselves healed up. Tapping along to this rhythm is close to impossible. We'll recognize this as the Strong One theme that played during the Barrier Trio fight, but there's something different about this one. This one is rendered in a diabolical 29:16 time signature. Shogo Sakai, Mother 3's composer, already kind of pushes the limits of what you'd expect out of a chiptune GBA soundtrack. Let me give an example from elsewhere in the soundtrack. He's able to create the feeling of improvisation in a lot of his songs, especially in the Magypsy Party song with the saxophone that goes, I'm trying my best here. Here's what it actually sounds like. Why is this noteworthy? Well, the way that these programs sound font songs are made is by putting quantized notes on a tracker. The tools to make these songs and the systems to play them back on the GBA sound chip lend themselves to more rigid structure. That's why it's impressive when someone's able to twist the tools in such a way to make it sound like someone is improvising live. And let's bring it back to this fight and this song. This is Mother 3 at its most experimental with time signatures. It's the version of the Barrier Trio song which plays in 15/8, but this version cuts the last end off of every 8th beat. The tempo is also changing constantly. You're going at 126 beats per minute for 3/4 notes, then 180 beats per minute for 2/4 notes, then 236 beats per minute for 1/4 note, 126 beats per minute for 1/4 note, and then 102 beats per minute for 1/4 note. Then repeat. Getting a 16-hit combo in this fight, it's next to impossible. It can be done, but it's very hard. Relating this back to the game itself, this one limits the amount of damage you're able to throw at the masked man, even if you're generally skilled at this combat system, and this is going to exhaust you by goading you into trying to keep up with the music, and then you're probably going to fail, and that's going to frustrate you, and it's going to make you feel like you're beating your head against a wall all through this fight. If that's where your head is at, then this game is doing its job. All this to say, this fight imposes difficulty in more ways than one. When we beat the masked man, his Pigmask allies instantly cower and abandon him. They're no more loyal to the man in the mask than they are to the Clayman. He's treated without one drop more dignity or humanity than them. This is more Pigmask philosophy in practice. Barely holding it together, we force the masked man to back off and fly away to fight another day. The vines covering the temple are frozen in time, and so that's why the Pigmas weren't able to get in, even with all their destructive power. We sprinkle Ionia's Waters of Time on the vines on Chupichupoyoi Temple, which accelerates them through a Death Stranding-like instant life cycle and gets them out of our way. Mother 3 definitely prides itself on offering creative ways to open doors, and while this isn't quite as entertaining as a monkey dance, I'll take it. Before we pull the sixth needle, Ionia gives us some words of wisdom and encouragement, and teaches Kumatora, the girl she raised, how to perform the ultimate Psy technique that we all know and love from Earthbound, PK Star Storm. A lot of people's first exposure to Ness and Lucas, myself included, came from Super Smash Bros., so you might think that they used this technique, but in Earthbound it was the prince from Dalam, Pooh, who used Starstorm, and in Mother 3, Kumatora is the ultimate Psy user who's going to bear Starstorm. The same is true of PK Fire and PK Freeze. These are never used by Ness or Lucas, but by Kumatora or Paula. I need to turn the Franklin badge back on myself for a second, because I'm realizing now that I haven't really been consistent about whether I'm calling Psy techniques PSI or Psy. I'm not really sure if there's a consensus, and I don't care to look it up, so I'll just say what suits me in whatever given moment, which is usually Psy. Once Kumatora receives this last bit of wisdom, we say our goodbyes to Ionia, the last Magypsy that we know, and the one that we've interacted with the most over the course of the game. The Magypsies were certainly memorable, weren't they? Flamboyant, extreme representations of all the best in humanity. At times, they were hard to understand, and I'm sure on the much larger timescales of their lifespans, maybe it was hard for them to understand us too sometimes. But through it all, the sincerity of their love for life and the goodness of their intentions shine through. Goodbye, Ionia, and goodbye, Magypsies. We'll miss you. Well, there is one more out there, somewhere. The only Magypsy remaining is the elusive Locria, who is as shrouded in mystery as the final needle itself. As Ionia vanishes, the last thing she whispers is, "Oh, Locria is nearing the seventh needle." And that's all we get. A combination of resonating with the pulled needle and enduring the PK love-fueled fight with the masked man enables Lucas to learn his ultimate Psy technique, PK Love Omega. And at this point, it feels like we could take on the world, even that King Master P himself. And speak of the devil, the sound of some chintzy lounge music filters into the temple. All the winds of change in Mother 3, and especially in Chapter 7, have been blowing toward New Pork City, and now we're about to get our VIP ticket straight there, into the Lion's Den. A chauffeur offers us an invitation from Master Porky himself. This is the first time that he's named. If you refuse, he insists that there is no with Master Porky. This is another non-choice that's in keeping with Mother 3's ethos of laying ants on the ground to block your path. If railroading you is necessary, it's going to find an entertaining way to do it. So we walk all the way around the limo and kiss Chupichupoyoi Temple goodbye, and we are off to New Pork City with this prick driver. Still, I appreciate the ride in a way. It kind of feels like taking a load off after the very long haul that was Chapter 7. At first glance, it looks like we're really traveling in style. A downbeat, loungy version of the Pig Mask anthem floats in over the limo ride. On closer inspection, though, everything here is completely artificial and unusable. You can't drink the drinks, you can't shoot pool on the pool table, even the impressive pyramid of stacked wine glasses is merely a painting. All of the wealth and excess here is just a hollow projection, a facade, if you will, meant to distract from Master Porky's deeper hollowness. When we've had enough, we can walk up to the prick driver to ask, "Are we there yet?" and he'll show us our first proper view of New Pork City. The very first thing we see is the imposing Empire Porky building, jutting through the clouds. The city, far below, emanates a plaster fakeness, a chintzy glow. Its inauthentic charm is a magnification of all the artifice we got a taste of on this limousine ride. This is New Pork City. We have at least one thing in common with all the villagers from Tazmily who were seduced by the allure of New Pork. That thing we share with them is the certitude that our destiny awaits us here. The time the Magypsies spoke of is drawing near, the end of the world. It's been an impossibly fun and memorable ride, but all things must come to an end. This is it. We made it to the last chapter of Mother 3. Welcome to New Pork City. We touch down, say goodbye to Prick Driver, and set foot into the big city for the first time. The Empire Porky building towers impossibly high above the rest of New Pork City, up through the clouds like we saw in the opening cutscene. It's an oppressive symbol of Porky's real power, not unlike the Combine Citadel in Half-Life 2. So while Empire Porky holds the real power, there's nothing real about the rest of New Pork City. The Empire Porky building is the fountainhead from which all the sick in New Pork City, and really the whole game, is flowing from. Everything besides Porky HQ is either a monument to Porky, a hedonistic outlet for his supplicants, or a cesspool for waste produced by the first two types of structure I mentioned. Everyone we know seems to have been gathered here like lambs to the slaughter, suckling on chimerized sushi hot dogs. We have some time to explore the city here and get a picture of just how vapid and hollow Porky's utopia is. The fake wooden building edifices remind me of that episode of Ed, Edd n Eddy where the Eds make a fake cardboard city, Edtropolis. The whole house of cards seems ready to blow over at the slightest breeze, but this place isn't built to last. It seems more like bait, with our friends being the hunted animals. Who cares if this city lives up to all it promises to be, so long as it does its job and gets the prey into the trap? Heading into the theater in the east side of New Pork, they're playing a movie selected by Master Porky himself. When we talk to the rapper-looking dude to the left of the movie theater entrance, he talks about a stink bug who's smelling up the theater, but then he says, maybe I should blow this popsicle stand, which, if you'll recall, is something Porky said in Earthbound. Heading into the theater, scenes from Earthbound are displayed in their original Super Nintendo sprite work on the screen. It's very strange that Porky would have produced the Earthbound movie, and stranger still that he would dedicate a whole theater to showing it 24/7. But this is in keeping with Porky's creepy lionization of Ness, by preserving Ness's yo-yo in his room in Thunder Tower back in Chapter 5 in a very creepy, fetishistic way. Before we have too much time to dwell on Porky's Earthbound obsession, we discover a stink bug who's been stinking up the place, hiding in the front row. You know, I'm not sure if this is intentional because it would be unique to the US localization of Mother 2, but the combination of the stink bug and seeing Mr. Belch on screen, it's reminding me of that ill-conceived smell-o-vision This Game Stinks ad campaign for Earthbound that they played in the United States. The stink bug flees into the ventilation system through the speaker on the left, and Boney gives chase, leaving just the three humans to explore New Pork City for a bit. Making our way to the arcade to try to head Boney off underground, we get to witness another example of how Porky's turned everyone we know and love into mollified husks of their former selves. Thomas, who was first to act with our father Flint all the way back in Chapter 1, is now addicted to video games and can't be bothered to give us the time of day. But hey, judging by the comically long sequence of sound effects it plays if we pay the 10 DP it costs to actually play the arcade game ourselves, it seems pretty fun. Heading underground, we find ourselves in New Pork City's sewers. Except for the Technicolor sludge, this area looks just about identical to the sewers in Earthbound's big city, Fourside. The real difference is in context and tone rather than content. In Earthbound, the city was an inspiring, bustling place. The trash, traffic, and even the sewers were part of the charm. In Mother 3, the sewers come so late in the game at the end of a long degeneration of the natural harmony we saw at the beginning. We've seen glimpses of the waste that Porky's progress leaves behind with the trash-laden Clayman we fought earlier. The sewers are a much more thorough reminder of the garbage that Porky's way of life leaves in its wake. There's another toxic waste dump up above New Pork, which communicates the same thing. We're asked to consider the ugly side of urban progress, specifically Porky's style of insatiable more progress. Making our way through the sewer, we reunite with Boney, who's made a discovery within a forgotten part of the sewer. He followed the stink bug all the way into some abandoned tenements deep underground, where Leader, the tall, silent bell ringer from Tasmally Village, awaits us. Leader is about to drop some of the biggest lore bombshells we're going to get over the course of Mother 3. There's a lot of content here to take in, so Leader instructs the stink bug in the corner to memorize everything he's saying so that the player can play back this story if they miss out on any of the details the first time. Gymnopede starts to play, as we get the most concrete and coherent explanation yet of how the pieces on the board in Mother 3's story came to be where they are now. Once upon a time, there was a world, our world, and at some point, humans destroyed the world. Everyone had an inkling that it would happen at some point, and then it really did happen. It's an ominous, matter-of-fact statement that resonates with our world full of nuclear weapons and the potential for civilization-ending pandemics. The only human beings who survived the end of the world did so by boarding some form of ark called the White Ship, the details of which are kept beautifully vague. Personally, I like to think of it as a hyper-technological spaceship of some kind that the late-stage humans developed, which was then later mythologized in more mythic terms like the White Ship. The travelers on the White Ship fled a doomed world that had accumulated more ills than it could bear. Humans could no longer live in the world that they had built. The one refuge that these people found was the Nowhere Islands, shrouded from the destruction of the world by virtue of being on the body of the Dark Dragon, a being which is the manifestation of the Earth's power itself. This is the place that the Magypsies already lived as well, guarding the Dark Dragon's power, the same place that the Osohe civilization already rose and fell upon. To draw a Douglas Adams parallel, the Nowhere Islands are a bit like the restaurant at the end of the universe, or to compare us to Half-Life again, a bit like the Zen border world. The Nowhere Islands are a fertile, lived-in nexus of power located right at the edge of space and time. This is Mother 3 world. The passengers on board the White Ship sought to undo and revise all the mistakes of their past and start anew in Tazmily Village. Tazmily was impossible and ideal because it truly was impossible and ideal. It was an attempt to whitewash a history and suppress human nature itself. Human nature is what caused even the hard-won peace in Earthbound to decay over time. Meanwhile, in Mother series chronology, after the events of Earthbound, Porky is still in possession of a time distorter. It's how he's able to taunt Ness in the post-credits teaser at the end of Earthbound that took 11 years to pay off. Porky finds himself invading, getting defeated in, and then locked out of every time period in existence. After enough time, the only time and place left to him is space-time Switzerland, the Nowhere Islands. Mother 3 world is a no-man's land at the end of space and time where all the failures, hopes, and ugly warts and good-natured quirks of the human race are circling the drain with the player right in the center. The same thing that attracted the passengers of the White Ship to the Nowhere Islands attracted Porky here: necessity. Porky's conclusion at seeing the world from all temporal angles is that human nature will inevitably doom and unravel any attempts to rebuild and do better, like Tazmily Village. Leader reveals that with the help of the traitorous final Magypsy, Locria, Porky set out to fulfill his own pessimistic view of human nature, accelerate the last remnants of humanity toward prostituting out their souls and ultimately dying forever once Porky completes his plan of having his proxy pull all the needles on his behalf, remaking the world in his nihilistic image. The masked man is this proxy. The score is now 3-3, match point for the world. Okay. All of this information is a lot to take in. Leader's revelations recast the themes of capitalism and progress present over the course of the game. Tazmily is not a pre-industrial ideal society corrupted by the serpentine allure of money and power by a bad actor. Rather, Tazmily is a post-industrial society, or maybe even a post-post-industrial society. A post-post-apocalyptic society. It's a society that saw the world doomed by war and wealth, and resolved to do better, to put that plan into action in the best way humanly possible, and still humanity is led down the same rabbit hole by Facade and Porky that doomed it in the first place. And so, with Tazmily hollowed out and empty, with all humanity here, brought into Porky's lies, circling the drain with us at the end of the world, the stage is set at 3-3, advantage overwhelmingly with Porky. But we have something greater than any army, the love of our family and friends. And with that, Leader gives us his first and only command as our leader. Go and pull the final needle. Stop Porky from twisting the world into his own image. Prove him wrong about how human beings really are, and make the world into something better in the process. And with that, we're ready to head back to the surface and face our destiny. Winding our way back up to the surface, we're ready to stomp Porky into mincemeat as soon as humanly possible. So when Facade shoots out of the water and his dopey interpreter floats down to introduce the new and improved Miracle Facade, we are as ready as we will ever be to bury Facade once and for all. It's a tough fight, and Miracle Facade is looking gnarlier than ever, but we persevere ultimately. Facade is unceremoniously dunked with the rest of the trash into the stream of purple sewage. The final note Facade goes out on is a comic one, as his interpreter bluntly states that she is now out of a job, and as such, her services will no longer be required here. She floats off gently, and Miracle Facade becomes truly and finally one with the muck. He is dead. Emerging in New Pork City and on the warpath for Master Porky himself, we notice that there are a lot more people walking around than before. Most of them have only stupid nonsense to say, and their visual appearance is starting to look rough, to say the least. Are these people being mass-produced or something? A chilling line we hear from Nippolite when we talk to him in the park is that there are no graves in this city. Means that nobody dies here? Unlikely. Probably more so means that nobody cares if you die here. This stands in direct opposition to the peaceful Sunset Cemetery we visited many times through the game to pay respects to our mother. Okay, this place is making me sick. It's time to take the fight to King P himself. We are on the warpath, and we march right into the lobby of the Empire Porky building. Porky is expecting us, as the doormen are happy to let us know. This is our last chance to stock up on items before the final gauntlet of the game, so we should do that before proceeding up the elevator. The elevator in the opulent Empire Porky building is now repaired to allow passage to the concert hall on the 24th floor. Hey, it's 86 floors shy of where we need to be. We need to get to the 100th floor. But that's no skin off our back, because DCMC are playing a concert tonight on the very same 24th floor. The elevator ride up sends a chill down your spine. There's this very hollow, echoey tone that implies you're getting into something much larger than you expect. We arrive on the 24th floor, and an emotional reunion with the DCMC gang gives way to a momentary sequence, the last time we'll control Duster in Mother 3, where you get to pick up Lucky's legendary afro yourself, as your friends smile on at you. DCMC is reunited for one last show at the end of the world, and this time they're not blaring a propaganda piece for King P like they were contracted to. They are cutting loose with a triumphant anthem celebrating our journey, all our friends, and our family, celebrating the whole world, and delivering a massive middle finger directly to Porky from within his own headquarters. Johnny Silverhand wishes he was as rocker boy as DCMC. DCMC's triumphant theme here invokes many of Mother 3's most uplifting and memorable leitmotifs. It's a glorious, satisfying rage against the system. Every phrase of the song reminds us of different steps along the way of our crazy journey, each step being at Porky's expense. Now, DCMC is playing our songs, the world's songs. It's awesome. I also love how the GBA has a primitive but killer light show for the band that blinks and changes colors along to the song exactly in time. The band follows up DCMC's theme with an encore performance of Samba de Combo, a Latin-style salsa jam that calls back to the motif that played while you delivered happy boxes as salsa to Tazmili's villagers back in Chapter 3. Now, we're delivering genuine rebellious expression and happiness to the people, even the ones under Porky's thrall who bought into his fake concept of happiness. Naturally, Porky can't allow this to go on. He interrupts the show and tries to hurry us along to the 100th floor, but the damage to his ego and reputation is already done. People have seen him be defied. Onward and upward we go, to the 100th floor, to confront King P. I have to mention it again because I just love how eerie it is. The music in the elevator is so chilling. But okay, here we are, the 100th floor. This does not look like Porky's ultimate lair at all. This is a pen full of hippo launchers. Yeah, Porky is just messing with us and wasting our time because he can, because it's amusing to him. And speaking of, after the hippo pen, we take the next creepy elevator up to Porky's personal den of iniquity. Yep, this is Porky's harem. In addition to the harem of mind-controlled women who are here to wait on Porky, hand, foot, and every other appendage, there's also an O2 machine up here for any and all masculine sucking that might be required. After many hundreds of years of myopic isolation, it seems that Porky's sexual appetite became as insatiable as his other appetites for food, violence, and power. After the harem room, we take another elevator ride to yet another 100th floor. And it's here we find the crown jewel of all New Pork City, the toilet floor. It's like the endless sunflower fields, but endless toilets instead. It's an entire floor where we find room after room of already occupied toilet stalls, unoccupied toilet stalls with items and passageways forward. It's effectively a comic relief floor with all sorts of toilet-related gags jam-packed into a dense space. It's not like Mother 3 has a shortage of toilet-related gags elsewhere in the game. I almost wonder if this was like an overflow room, where if they couldn't pack any more into the scene while people are waiting in line for the bathroom or the bathroom at Club Titty Boo, then everything can overflow into this floor, which has hundreds of bathrooms. Highlights from this section include all the ghosts from Osohei shoved into a single bathroom stall, as well as a surprise visit from the ultimate Chimera, and of course, Porky's golden throne. Man, just imagine all the epic turds that King Master P must have dropped in this very location. My heart is beating so fast, there are signs that someone was here. The next 100th floor, on our way to the real 100th floor, introduces a sudden tonal shift. A down-tempo version of the Magypsy theme floats in. We find ourselves on a floor of the Empire Porky building that's been decorated to resemble a desert, much like the one we explored with Facade and Salsa earlier in Chapter 3. Proceeding into the next room, it's unmistakable, this is a Magypsy's house. Locrea's house, the last traitorous Magypsy. The crates of luxury bananas, half-eaten peels, and miracle horns on display and Arabian costumery on the bed make it absolutely clear that Facade was the traitorous Magypsy all along. This reveal is cool and unexpected. It also opens up so many questions that invite interesting speculation. Why did Locrea cooperate with Porky? Was it forced? Was it voluntary? Why did Locrea choose to live as a man, Facade, rather than as a Magypsy? Pulling the needles causes the Magypsies to disappear. Was this some way to distract from Locrea's own needle? The final needle isn't located until after we kill Facade. Was Facade or Locrea engaged in some kind of elaborate misdirection for either the greater good or for self-preservation? Even if these theories were true, which we just truly don't know if they are, would good intentions justify the obvious cruelty towards Salsa? Facade treated us cruelly, even when there was no one else to prove anything to around. Why suppress all traces of femininity? Is Facade's dual nature, while traitorous, still basically just in keeping with the Magypsy's amplified dual nature in all things? It's around this point, mulling these questions over, that we'll recall how we dunked Facade into a trash plume a little while back. Facade, or Locrea, kind of deserved it, but not sure how good I feel about it anymore. At minimum, knowing who the other Magypsies are, we know that Locrea was once, or had the potential to be good. So why wasn't she, or he? Or at very least, we know that Locrea was taking care of a little mouse in the privacy of her chambers. The mouse genuinely misses Locrea. I wonder if this was part of the deal with Porky. Cooperate and be permitted a little artificially maintained corner of the world, just how she wants it, and here, only here, can she be herself, can she be kind. Maybe I'm being too kind and reading too much benevolence into Locrea based on what I know about the other Magypsies. We will truly never know the answers to these questions. Porky indicates that we have our noses somewhere that we shouldn't be, and that seems true to an extent. There's no way Facade would ever let us see this if he were alive. Let's just move on. Next, we're on to the construction site, which is home to some of the toughest chimeras we'll fight in the game, as well as some of the best physical comedy. That this area is still under construction tells us a few things. One, it seems like Porky wasn't quite ready for us. 2, it seems like this building is getting more floors added to it in the middle to suit whatever arbitrary whim Porky thinks up that day. Almost like a sandwich that you keep lifting the top piece of bread off of and throwing more layers of meat and cheese into the middle, just constantly making a taller, more decadent sandwich. And 3, that some floors are completely unfinished while floors higher up are finished, speaks to how arbitrary and capricious the master of this house is. On the next 100th floor, we find ourselves in what must be one of the Pigmath's highest value laboratories. The chimeras we fight here are the toughest in the game, and are essentially completely inorganic and mechanized by now. It's also on this floor that we find one of the most terrifying discoveries yet, the Nice Person Hot Spring. This is a room where people and creatures of all sizes and shapes have been pickled in mind-controlling substances and hooked up to machinery to make them nice, or in other words, more pliable to Porky's every whim. What's the difference, right? The happy boxes are the gentle approach. This is the strong arm approach. Or maybe it's just a natural extension of the same thing, of television's mind-melting properties. I don't think it's an accident that these tanks in the happy boxes glow green in a very similar way, and produce the same effects. The way everyone is just suspended here is very eerie. It reminds me of the comment Nippolite made back in the courtyard, that there are so many people, but no graves. You wonder, if this is how Porky treats the living, what does he do with the dead? Complete lack of human dignity. This Nice Person Hot Spring sets the context for us to head upstairs to the next 100th floor to become Porky's plaything ourselves. Instead of an elevator this time, now we're in a stairwell with different music that's visually reminiscent of the end of time from Chrono Trigger. It seems like we've broken through to the inner sanctum around Porky. We are getting closer. I can almost taste Porky's bacony keister. Oh hey, it's Prick Driver. Just like he said he would, we've seen him again and now he's wearing a different hat. Now he's serving as Prick Game Show host. At least we have some more context now, having seen the hot spring, as to how he might have gotten so brainwashed and become as much of a prick as he has. He's here to guide us through a gauntlet of challenges meant to judge whether we're worthy of meeting Master Porky or not. If the words humor and indulge mean anything to us, we'll know what to do. Yes, we have to intentionally let Porky's robot proxy beat us at whack-a-mole, an obstacle course, and then a balloon inflating challenge. But we can't let him win by too much, or he'll think that we aren't worthy or that we're throwing the game intentionally. Can't have that. No, we have to let Porky barely beat us to make him think that it was a close, fair match, and that he barely won the day. It's so pathetic and juvenile. Porky hasn't changed one iota since Earthbound, and like at the end of that game, he couldn't be more frustratingly, sophomorically juvenile and flip in the face of the most serious climactic stakes the world could be facing. Once we pass muster, we ascend a flight of red-carpeted stairs to the real 100th floor. But just our luck, between us and Porky's chamber is a massive attack toy that Porky has given orders to kill anyone trying to pass through. Lucky us. The fight against the natural killer cyborg can either be hard or easy depending on how overleveled we are. By this point, as a rule of thumb, if Kumatora learns PK ground, you're on easy straight and basically nothing can stop you anymore. If you haven't leveled this far, the natural killer cyborg might be on the tougher side. Either way, the battle theme is awesome and easy to tap along to, which makes this fight consistently fun in my view. Design-wise, the massive pig robot is appropriate and creepy, considering the huge brain housed in the dome up top is likely real brain matter from people or animals fused together to power this death machine. After beating the natural killer cyborg, the path to Porky is wide open. We walk through the threshold and find ourselves in a long, vertical hallway, and as we walk, the nostalgic twinkle of the Mother 1 theme plays. This gives us a chance to reflect for a minute on how far we've come to get to this point, not just in Mother 3, but through the whole Mother series. And as we're tossing this all over in our heads against the backdrop of a bare hallway, you're probably at some private stop on memory lane already thinking about one of your favorite moments from the Mother series. And when you're in that headspace, you open the door, and you're overwhelmed with a sweeping visual of Porky's very own Earthbound Museum. The boat that ferries us through this gallery of nostalgic beats from Earthbound is even modeled after Ness's house. This is nostalgic for us, to be certain, but also creepy considering that this is Porky's shrine to Mother 2. Does Porky even remember his role in this game? Considering he thinks Ness is his friend, he certainly doesn't remember it accurately. This section hits hard emotionally because we miss all of this stuff. We recognize everything in this room and remember it fondly, but seeing it here, seeing all these Earthbound references stolen from their moment in time and made to sit here on display out of context for the private enjoyment of one of that game's antagonists just feels wrong. It feels like Porky is clinging on to a childhood that he can never have back and never understood correctly in the first place. By passing through this room, appreciating the memories but moving on with our purpose clear, we avoid falling into the same trap of creepy, quotey nostalgia that Porky fell into. The door to the next room signals the threshold of the core of Porky's true inner sanctum. The door that indicates that we're actually getting close to Porky is a creepy mechanical outgrowth with cables and wires that look almost like aortic blood vessels. You can't exactly tell where the metallic door ends and the molding of the more hotel-like gold trim begins. This visual dynamic is woven deeply through Mother 3, from the piece of architecture here to the dual nature of the Magypsies to the half-organic, half-metallic logo for the game itself. These contrasts are some of Mother 3's central fascinations. In his interview with Nintendo Dream magazine, Itoi explains his thinking about some of these themes, qualifying his answer with the statement that his thinking on the subject is fluid and frequently changing. When things that don't match at all are attached to one another, it's mentally unsettling. I've only written one novel, and in the opening I wrote about a hearse. A hearse has a casket of both metal and wood, but when you try and think about how and where they connect to one another, it makes you feel a little weird. I feel like these are all things of modern times, these feelings of uneasiness and discomfort, but I still understand that they make up the world I'm in. That logo is a symbol of that, and Porky is a symbol of humankind. Itoi has given a lot of great interviews about Mother 3. I recommend you go and search through them if you have any interest in hearing his thoughts about the rest of the game's themes. The end of that statement there, that Porky is a symbol of humankind, that is dead on. He is a symbol of the absolute worst that humankind has to offer: cynicism, hedonism, and lust for power. Here, on top of the world, Porky invites us to witness the beginning of the end of everything. The camera shows us Porky's terrifying aortic machinery and then pans back down to reveal the chubby young Porky that we remember from Earthbound. He just wants us to play with him, to love him, to dote on him. And when we won't, he explodes. And with that, Porky-01 drops down from the ceiling and attacks us with the rest of his mechanical cohorts. This is reminiscent of Phase 1 of the Gygus fight from Earthbound. The fight against these Porky robots is given a suitably slapping, upbeat chiptune accompaniment. The English name for this song is Porky's Pokies, which presents us with as good an opportunity as any to talk about Porky's name. So here's the deal. In Japan, Porky was always named Porky. End of story. When Mother 2 was localized as Earthbound in the United States, Porky's name was changed to Pokey. But then, when Lucas and Mother 3 content was included in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and the pig theming made it pretty much a requirement that Porky be called Porky, Poky's name was retconned for American audiences back to Porky by way of a trophy description. Of course, Porky is the correct name, but I do smile a bit at the fact that whoever was giving these songs their English titles found a way to pay tribute to Porky's original incorrect Pokey name by naming these robots his Pokies. Porky's Pokies do everything mechanically, which is a funny touch on their flavor text, just when things are at their bleakest and most overwhelming, and it seems that there's way too many robots to mechanically overcome. Who else but DCMC bursts in to save the day? This is a callback to when the Runaway Five swooped in to save us in the Monotoli building in Fourside back in Earthbound. But this moment is bigger though. It cements DCMC as my favorite musical act in the Mother series, since their assistance comes at a much more pivotal moment in the story, against a much more central foe. With a little help from our friends, Porky's Pokies are defeated. When the dust settles, the silence is broken by the person we'd like to hear from most right now. It's our father, Flint. Come, Boney. Lucas, this is it. This is finally it. You got that right, Pops. This is it. Wes wonders if we've managed to corner Porky, or if Porky's actually just managed to gather us all right where he wants us. In reality, it's a little of column A and a little of column B. Porky asks to get a closer look at Lucas. Then he introduces himself for real, proper this time. Porky is a time traveler who's seen all the past and all the future. He's the most clever, charming, and troublemaking boy in all forever, Master Porky Minch. But the monster that emerges from the forest of vines and arterial machinery up in the top of this building is anything but a boy anymore. The Porky we finally meet, even though all the likenesses of him that we've seen to this point resemble the mischievous kid that we met in Earthbound, the real Porky is a hollowed-out corpse, essentially, barely clinging on to an ever emptier existence. While his appearance has changed in grotesque ways, his personality hasn't evolved one iota from the broken, snot-nosed kid we met in Earthbound, which is even more grotesque. Spankety, 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 Master Porky coughs out. Porky greets us all by reiterating his answer to the struggle leader introduced us to. Porky represents the pessimistic answer that mankind failed before and any attempt to do better is equally stupid and doomed to failure. Porky suggests we would be able to avoid the doomed fate of all mankind here if we too only followed the selfish desires of a great hero. You have to wonder who he's referring to, Gygus or Ness or himself. Porky is so far gone that he can't understand why the other half of this yin-yang of entities circling the drain right now, the optimistic streak of humanity represented by the villagers here, why they would even want to cling on to their short, pitiful, un-awesome, un-Porky existences. After treating all the world as his oyster, Porky has exhausted its value in his eyes, for entertainment and exploitation. It's time to draw the curtains on the whole damned game. An end to the futility and boredom. Porky clarifies for us, everything he's made us and the world endure to this point has been out of pure boredom, nothing more meaningful than that. Our mother died, and who knows what happened to our brother Klaus. Everything happened because Porky was bored. Because he could, he did, and it brought him no more joy than flushing a turd down one of his many thousands of golden toilets. And flushing us is exactly what Porky intends to do when his lifeless son, the masked man, pulls the final needle and foists control of the dragon and the world over to Porky. Porky casually assumes that we will turn into garbage or dust or something when this happens. Porky admits that might be kind of sad, but matter-of-factly observes that he would be crushed under the weight of boredom if it were any other way. And then chillingly he asks us after a coughing fit, "Do you understand now? Do you understand the sadness Master Porky bears now that he's godlike?" Horrifying. It's at this point an alarm sounds. The final needle has just been located deep underground. As an aside, this is one point that gets me wondering about what Locria or Facade was really up to, cooperating with Porky in so many ways, but never showing her needle's location. There are more layers of mystery now that will never be solved. I love games like this that give you plenty of open-ended questions to chew on, and Mother 3 gives us a boatload of them in the character of Facade alone. Back to the action. Porky opts to take a cushy shortcut down to the needle, and sends Lucas, Duster, Kumatora, Boney, and Flint down the long way to the center of the earth. We fall for a long, long time on our way down. Technically, the elevator is moving down, but for all intents and purposes, this is a free fall. Put in context, with the many long elevator rides on the way up, through the many fake 100th floors on our way to the real 100th floor, A fall this long, plunging us all the way back down from the top of the Empire Porky building, which we know is above the clouds, down to street level, and then deeper still. Still falling and falling and falling. Holy mackerel, the scale of this fall is huge. We must be at terminal velocity. It feels like we're descending somewhere truly final, deep in the center of the Earth. Once we collect ourselves from the crumpled heap at the foot of the elevator, our father Flint insists that there's something he needs to do on ahead. The caves underground are enormous. Our footsteps echo off the cavernous walls deep below Empire Porky. This all looks like recent construction, freshly bored into the bedrock of the world in a mad scramble for the final needle. The enemies that we encountered down here are no longer pigmasts or mechanical chimeras, but instead hyper-abstract denizens of a very elemental place it's clear that we should not be. Bolts of electricity called phenomenos and fractal geometric formations of alloy called minerali zigzag wildly through the crooked underground paths. Because of how fast these enemies move, these fights are tough to avoid, but not tough to complete at this point. An unexpected boon on the way to the final battle comes by way of a hot spring in a box. After all the waltz rhythms, nut breads, and fart boxes we've put up with over the course of the game, a full party heal in the heart of the most unwelcoming environment yet is welcome. On our way forward, we find our father crumpled over on his knees, with his hat cast off his head, visually defeated in every sense. Flint says out loud what we've known for a long time. That masked man, he's Klaus. Lucas, he's your brother Klaus. Hearing this from our father directly at this location carries so much weight. Keep in mind that for 3 years, Flint has been singularly dedicated to finding Klaus, dedicated even to the point of Lucas's detriment. And now that he's found him, what can he do about it? Nothing. Nothing except trust his son Lucas. Trust that the person that he and others underestimated and failed in so many ways will be able to do the impossible. To stop the mad child God King Porky and somehow save the lost soul of Klaus. Eventually, we make our way up a ladder to be stopped by Master Porky Minch himself, now untethered from his freakish viney enclosure on high. He's now mobile and ready to see the final step of his game through to completion, up close and personal. He describes how his little monster is going to pull the needle up ahead. Huh? That monster's name is Klaus? Its name was Klaus? That almost sounds like a person's name. Porky mocks and dehumanizes Lucas's brother in the most despicable, unforgivable ways possible. Here, we're face to face with the putrid husk of a man-child who tore our family apart and destroyed our world, and now has the audacity to laugh in our faces about it while forcing our brother to destroy the world? Porky is such an awesomely loathsome villain. Enough of this. It's time for the Pig King to fall. Porky blocks the way. His gnarly spider mech is massive and terrifying. Its attacks are not unlike Gygas's. When Porky attacks us, the text takes the form of Porky did something, or Porky coughed something up. It forces you to imagine this spider mech moving and interacting with Porky's body in ways that defy convention. Blinking, writhing, flashing, biting, revolving, piercing. The game invites you to fill in the blank. It encourages you to imagine how Master King Piece of Pork here would physically go about trying to scrap with us, and it preserves an air of mystery around Porky's technology that we know originated from Gygas. It makes sense that its nature is still unclear to us. While we defeated Gygas in Earthbound, his evil still left a mark on Porky, amplifying a hole in his heart that was already there. One of the best pictures of the concept of evil that I know of comes from the man, the myth, the master, St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologiae. Evil in the hearts of human beings for Aquinas doesn't take the form of a substance or so much of an active presence or entity. Instead, for Aquinas, evil is a privation. It's a lack, the absence of love. Evil is like a hole in a sock. Porky is the ultimate manifestation of human evil. He is completely hollowed out, physically in his wasted form and spiritually in his complete alienation from and apathy toward humanity. Porky tells us in his own words, "Let me fill you in on something. No matter how much you attack me, I'll never die. Bet you didn't know that, did you? Porky fills us in more on the depth of his internal void. I've gone through time and space so many times, I haven't aged like a normal person. Who knows? I might be 1,000 years old, or even 10,000 years old. Jesus Christ, he can't even pinpoint the order of magnitude of how old he is. But despite that, I'm still the same kid at heart. Isn't that funny? It is, isn't it? Doesn't it make you laugh? Are you laughing at me? Are you laughing at me? Completely unmoored from consequence and his own mortality, Porky has been granted the leeway to become as evil as humanly possible. To revisit Aquinas' picture of evil, the hole in the sock has grown and grown to the point that there's hardly a single thread of sock even remaining. There is just the void. Just Porky's despicable, nihilistic conclusion that this world is doomed toward pain and that it would be better off not existing at all, especially if witnessing its destruction would bring me, myself, and I even one single util of entertainment value, because all our other sources of dopamine have lost their effect. Despicable. Truly, beautifully despicable. What a villain. It's time to teach Porky the power of PK love and put a stop to this madness once and for all. He taunts us through the fight while dropping juicy lore. Similar to the fight with the natural killer cyborg, if we know PK ground by this point on Kumatora, this fight and all fights in the game are trivial. If not, we might need to be more strategic. Here, we're free to burn every last item we've accumulated over the course of the game. It will be our last chance to put this stuff to use, so let it fly. After a protracted fight against the God Emperor Pig King himself, we finally, truly get Porky on the ropes. But true to form, as he's about to lose, Porky changes the rules of the game on us. I'll never die. I'll never die. Nor will I ever be beaten. Lucas, you haven't won, just so you know. Even to the bitter end, a defeated Porky bargains and qualifies like a pathetic child. Porky beats his escape into a huge spherical device called the Absolutely Safe Capsule. As the name implies, once Porky is inside, no attack can ever have any effect on him ever again. Porky assures us that while we might think the absolute safety of the capsule is questionable, it truly is absolutely safe. He's forced Dr. Andonuts and the Mr. Saturns into making it, for sure, absolutely safe. These are the same folks who built time travel devices before and transferred Ness and Company's consciousness into robotic bodies, so we have every reason to believe Porky's claim here. Sure enough, he climbs on in, and all our attacks, sure enough, do 0 damage. And then Porky just sits there from within the absolutely safe capsule, sticking his tongue out at us from within, unable to do anything. A turn passes, where nothing can be done anymore, by either side. Then, the game realizes that this turn of events means the battle is, by definition, over. We gain 0 experience from the final showdown with Porky. Dr. Andonuts comes in to survey the aftermath of the battle. As evil as old Porky here is, Andonuts feels bad for him now. While it's true the absolutely safe capsule protects the ones sealed within from absolutely all manner of harm forever, once you enter it, you can never exit it. Everything outside the absolutely safe capsule is absolutely safe from whatever is within it, too. All Porky can do now, for all eternity, is simply exist in absolute safety within the absolutely safe capsule forever with his immortal life. Dr. Andonuts wonders if this fate, in a way, is maybe what Porky wanted all along. He asks us the philosophical question, but even after we answer yes or no, we get the chance to mull it over ourselves afterward. I'm reminded of the saying, "The gates of hell are locked from the inside." Putting aside the specific religious implications of that, the aphorism speaks to the role of choice in the doing of good and evil. Faced with the horror of the world, we have 2 choices. 1, to confront tragedy and grief forthrightly, or 2, to retreat into myopia and selfish gratification like Porky does. Ultimately, we watch Porky lock himself in an eternal hell of his own design, locking the gates permanently from the inside, just as the aphorism goes. Dr. Andonuts breaks the philosophical tension by rolling Porky around in the absolutely safe capsule like a dung beetle. Thank you, Doctor, that'll be all. Andonuts injects a final dose of sorely needed comic relief here, because now there is nothing ahead of us except the masked man in the final battle. Making it to the end of the line, we find the last hot spring in the game, a scenic spring sitting on top some glowing geometric horror in the center of the earth. The final hot spring has the same familiar hot spring theme, but a unique and eerie instrumentation that really sells this as our last chance to rest. The final save frog of the game here also points out that he is in fact the last frog. He tearfully thanks us for our continued patronage through the course of the game. Well, thank you, save frogs. Thank you for everything. We will never forget you. And with that, we head on in to the final chamber to face the masked man. Lucas, Boney, Kumatora, and Duster stand strong side by side, confronting their destiny. That familiar green nostalgic wave rushes over Lucas in the form of that green tint. The masked man strikes ruthlessly with lightning, which knocks the whole party unconscious except Lucas, who's protected by his Franklin badge. It reflects the masked man's lightning right back at him. And so begins the final battle with the masked man, taking damage from his own bolt of lightning, Lucas standing alone with his entire party out of commission. Much like the fight with Gygus in Earthbound, this is less like a real fight at this point and more like a puzzle. Attempting to revive our party leads to them getting instantly wiped back out by the masked man's lightning. We can't run away either. If we put up a shield, the masked man kills that shield, and if we try to attack, we maybe can try to, but we quickly fall apart and lose the will to. God damn it. This is our brother. This is our only brother. A voice is barely heard over the chaotic, shifting noise of this chamber. Lucas. From somewhere, you hear someone call your name. We do our best to hang on, but there's nothing we can do, really. Some more grueling turns pass, then the screen fades out again. It's Hinawa's voice. It's our mother. She's calling out to us the same way that she reached out to us in the sunflower fields of our mind in Chapter 6. Now, our mother is desperately trying to get through to her boys, but it isn't working. Some more grueling turns pass where all we can do is defend ourselves and try to stay alive. Our mother calls out again. Klaus, stop this. You aren't Porky's robot. You're our son. And still, all we can do is desperately guard and heal and hang on to life. And all this time, flipping through menus and waiting for our mother to try to call to us again, gives us time to really reflect on this situation. As our brother fights desperately to kill us, against his will, all we can do is sit there and take the hits, while this wretched, sickeningly sad music wafts over the battle, only to once in a while have a spacey, forgotten version of the love theme break through to remind us of all Porky stole from Klaus and our family. It's so twistedly sad, and the game takes its sweet time here, letting the tragedy of this situation really sink in. You aren't given a pass. You have to stare at and consider the depth of the grief here. Just when it can't get any more heartbreaking, when the masked man is about to blast us with PK Love Omega, Flint leaps in front of Lucas, taking the blow. Our father croaks out, Klaus, please remember. I've been looking for you for so long. Oh my god. And then after this, the game pauses, and then unceremoniously giving you zero reaction from the masked man, hits you with the masked man tried PK Love Omega again. Flint suffers major damage. Flint can no longer stand up. This is absolutely heartbreaking, and then again, we're alone. And so we sit there clinging to life and healing more and struggling through the awful sadness of this. This time our mother's voice calls out to us because we're the only one who will listen. Lucas, stop fighting. If only we could, Mom. Her voice sadly echoes. Klaus, you and Lucas are brothers. Jesus Christ, still no impact on the masked man? Or is there? The twisting red and blue background is ever so subtly lightening up. Can you hear me? You're Klaus. Your name is Klaus. You're our son. At this point, we're still taking and recovering from mortal damage just about every turn. The pain that Lucas is enduring here is immense. Please remember. Lucas. Klaus. Our mom entreats us loudly one last time, and thankfully, this call is loud enough to grant us, and presumably the man under the mask, a glimpse of one moment in time, a pivotal moment that the world would prove to hinge on. We caught a glimpse of this same moment in Chapter 6, but then the picture wasn't complete. The screen washes out to white, and we find ourselves standing over Lucas and Klaus, side by side in their cribs, so many years ago. What is the significance of this moment? It plays out as a conversation paced out for maximum emotional punch between Hinoa and Flint. We're listening to them name their baby boys. To think we would be blessed with 2 children at once. I bet they'll accomplish things together that they couldn't alone. That statement is so sad because they never got to do so much together when Klaus was separated from the family, but now in a way it's true that they have done so much together. They've shepherded the world together to its end. I'm sure they'll argue a lot too. Hey, what brothers don't? And I can see them helping each other out when they need it. And boy, does Klaus need our help now. Klaus and Lucas. I bet we'll mix them up a lot until they get bigger. Klaus and Lucas, huh? How do you want them to grow up to be? To be kind, just like you, is the answer. Not to be smart, not to be powerful, or to be rich, but to be kind. Oh, I was just gonna say, to be kind just like you. Great, then it's decided. Klaus, Lucas, make us proud. What we see in this flashback, what our mother shows us here, is the moment that Lucas and Klaus were given their names. Many cultures have some sort of equivalent of a christening, and in olden times, parents wouldn't even name their children until the christening. The reason being, you weren't sure if the child would survive to that point. When they do, that's when you give them a family name and imbue them with all your hopes and dreams for them for the future. The act of naming your child is one of the most powerful acts of love in the world. And this is what our mother needed Klaus to see. This moment of pure, powerful, unadulterated love. The only thing capable of unraveling tragedy on the scale that we've borne witness to in Mother 3 is love on a scale this big to answer it. We have control back now, and things have changed. The music has surrendered to a slow, longing version of the love theme. The text informs us Lucas isn't sure what to do anymore. By this point, I start to get a little misty-eyed. The masked man still attacks us, but with far less enthusiasm. He barely does any damage anymore. Then he covers his ears. Lucas still isn't sure what to do. The masked man limply attacks him, and then shuts his eyes. Lucas holds his ground. The masked man gazes at Lucas. Lucas wants to cry. Then, the masked man pointlessly attacks again, maintaining his stare. We've all run out of energy here. There is truly nothing left that anyone can do. God damn it. Then, through the darkness, one last time, we hear our mother's voice calling out to our brother to finally put his soul at ease. The screen fills with light as we hear her whisper, almost as if asking a child to come in after a long day of playing. Klaus, 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 come to your mother. You must be so exhausted. Come here, Klaus. This is my favorite line in Mother 3. The tragic simplicity of the line, combined with the music and your desperate need to see this family's torment come to an end, make this moment feel like exhaling after holding your breath for years. The first time I played Mother 3, this line just made me outright cry, and it still gets me choked up years later. The waterworks don't stop there. The masked man looks around as if searching for something. And then, he takes off his mask. The masked man removed his mask. His face looked just like Lucas's. It's interesting that at first, Gygus mirrors Ness's own face back to him in Earthbound, In Mother 3, Lucas finds himself similarly gazing into a face much like his own in the final encounter. Recall Itoi said that he intended Mother 3 to be a sort of mirror to reflect the heart of the player. His face looked just like Lucas's. It was Klaus. Of course it was Klaus. We always knew the masked man used to be Klaus before Porky got a hold of him. Why wait until now to declare in omniscient battle text for him that this person is truly Klaus? Simple. Because until now, Klaus wasn't here. Only the masked man. Now we have truly reached our brother for the first time in 3 years, after it seemed like he was finally and truly gone, as empty and corrupted as Porky. But Porky's attempt to remake Klaus in his hollow image fails for the same reason that Porky's attempt to remake the world fails. Love. The love and pain of Klaus's whole family, both present and from the world beyond, shines through much louder than Porky's programming for a critical moment, just long enough for Klaus, our older brother, to fire a decisive bolt of lightning at us. According to plan, this bolt bounces off of Lucas's Franklin badge and shoots right back at Klaus, dealing mortal damage. Klaus can't turn off Porky's programming, but he can use this moment of lucidity to kill himself and save his family and the world. The confidence of these next couple lines that end this encounter and their simple sense descriptions kill me every time. Against an all-white screen, we read, Klaus staggered toward Lucas. You can see it happening, so slowly. Klaus embraced Lucas. You can feel it. Lucas remembered Klaus's smell. That one gets me. You get it. And with that, we fade to black, and that wraps up the last fight in Mother 3. It's amazing to me that they were able to top what they accomplished in Earthbound, which already has one of the best endings to a game I've ever seen. Klaus speaks for the first time since Chapter 1. I'm sorry it turned out like this. I'm really happy you could be with me just before the end. Thanks, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I'm going to where Mom is now. Lucas, I hope we meet again someday. Bye. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sure we'll meet again. The screen fades in from black, and we see everyone looking on as Lucas cradles Klaus in his arms. Klaus gives his final breath. Our father Flint, completely vulnerable and bald, and having just witnessed his son die, he steps up to the plate for Lucas in the way that he failed to with his 2 sons 3 years ago when their mother died. He thanks us. He consoles us. Klaus was just hasty, that's all. We'll forgive our hasty brother, won't we? He's right. The only thing that positioned Klaus on one side of this fight and Lucas on the other is the same thing that made Klaus the first one out of bed in the morning to play with the Dragos. We can never fault our brother for being headstrong. With the tragedy we've just endured and our brother's lifeless body at our feet, there's no reason to delay any further. It's time to pull the last needle. Itoi uses crisp writing and careful use of Shogo Sakai's music to manage the energy in this ending scene perfectly. With tears streaming down your face, you have no other choice but to grit your teeth, and with all the hope and love in the world welling up in your heart, pull the final needle. Nothing needs to be sealed away anymore. Your life and the lives of all who believe in you, will you put it all on the line and pull the final needle? Yes. Yes, we do have what it takes. With the love of our father and all our friends who are still here with us, and with the love of Klaus and Hinua who are no longer with us, we've internalized the lessons of the world and these intolerable tragedies into something more whole and loving. And so we pull the final needle, knowing that everything will be okay. And so begins the end of the world. And this is no abstract flash of light where everyone magically wakes up and things are fine and dandy. No, this is a genuine rapture. The ground opens up. Meteors rain from the sky. Waterspouts whip up the seas, and everyone, every creature, will die. The pigmasts try to escape and do not succeed. Even if they got away, there's nowhere to go. The Nowhere Islands already sit as the last refuge of last resort at the end of time and space. There is nowhere else to go. The music swells to a crescendo as the Nowhere Islands we've come to know and love, the Mother 3 world we've watched change over the course of the game, is utterly destroyed. And the Dark Dragon, the herald of something truly new and truly better, bursts forth from the earth, and we fade to white as the dragon begins the act of creation. Goodbye, Mother 3 world. There will never be another like you. And it's at this point that we get a end? Title card in much the same way we did at the end of Earthbound. Except this time, instead of the question mark being a sequel hook, the question mark is an invitation to walk around and explore this ending. For starters, like we heard from the Magypsies, everyone is miraculously okay. Someone speaks to us in the darkness. It looks like everyone died, but then everyone was just okay. That's wonderful. We get to chat with all our favorite colorful people from the world of Mother 3 again. We get to clown with the Rope Snake, Wes, and Alec. We get to talk to Duster and Kumatora and watch them share a tender moment. We even get to meet Lucas himself. Every character gets their little bit of closure and is restored, even though we can't see them. Seems like the only person not restored to their healthy state is Porky. We bump into something wobbling around in the dark. He's still in there, in the absolutely safe capsule. Through his pride, Porky has effectively surgically removed himself from this new world. Porky, immortal from his time travel and stuck in the capsule, will never be a part of this new world. Itoi said in Nintendo Dream, "So, 5.5 billion years from now, Porky will still be alive, but the grief of that is incredibly depressing to me. It's amazing. Porky is truly a poem in himself." He sure is, Itoi, he sure is. Hopefully the new world has a better shot at flourishing, being free from Porky's influence and the worst aspects of human nature that he represents. After parting ways with Porky in the void, we bump into another round object in the dark, and this one is familiar. It's the doorknob that's been bouncing through Mother 3 alongside us since the beginning of our journey. And what are doorknobs for, if not opening doors? With the doorknob in hand, we say our final goodbyes and share a last thanks with the cast, and head on through the imaginary threshold, through the door to a brighter world. Dip to white and curtain call. And that is Mother 3. It ends on a note that invites us to imagine what a better world would look like. It stops short of literally showing us that new world. Instead, Mother 3 trusts that we will understand how to pursue a better world ourselves, thanks to everything we've learned along the way interacting with these characters in Mother 3 world. A common interpretation of the ending of Mother 3 is that everyone is okay on the cartridge. You can revisit the world of Mother 3 by picking up the doorknob, starting a fresh save, and seeing it all again, forcing them to relive all of this trauma to no purposeful end. I disfavor that interpretation in favor of this one. The Mother 3 characters are literally alive, still living, whatever state they're in the void of the game's ending, safe and sound. But they and the lessons they've taught us, even the villains, come with us as we use the doorknob to open the door back to our own world, hopefully bringing some love back with us. As far as these literal Game Boy Advance sprite characters are concerned, I'm happy for them to exist just as they do in this here curtain call, just sitting there having a good time. And I especially like to think this way when thinking about Lucas and Klaus here at the end. The curtain call ends with Klaus reuniting with Flint and Hinawa, sharing a laugh, petting Boney, and then finally you see a grown-up Lucas and Klaus greet each other and run off into tomorrow with all the hope in the world in their eyes. All the tragedy in this game, everything that all these characters have been through is worth it if we can have this moment right here. And it's not even really real, except that it is. It's beautiful. Well done, Mother 3. The curtain call is followed by the staff roll, the actual credits for the game. The curtain call was a medley of the different songs in Mother 3, and the staff roll is a medley of the main themes of the 3 Mother games. The first thread are the 8 melodies from Mother 1, followed by the 8 melodies that comprise Smiles and Tears in Earthbound, and then those give way to the love theme. In traditional Mother fashion, the staff roll concludes with a very special thank you for the player by name. Thanking the player in this way isn't unique to Mother 3, but Mother 3's handling of it definitely is, especially because every named character just thanked us in a void by name before this credit roll. The player is part of the experience in Mother, and this is going to sound stupid, but I think it's true. Both with this thank you and all through the game, you get the sense that the game loves you. The last in-game screenshot Itoi chooses to show in the staff roll is Mother Hinua releasing a dove, carrying a message of love for her family onto the wind. This right here is what Mother 3 and the Mother series as a whole is all about. On that final note, the true final ending card for Mother 3 fades in on a simple white screen. It's a recasting of the Mother 3 logo from the title, only this time it's no longer half wood and half metal. It is all wood. The metallic sphere or saucer that made up the O is now Mother Earth herself, covered in clouds, water, and trees, teeming with life, and a small wooden text card below the logo, End. No question marks, no qualifications. This is really the end. We've made it. And if you are still here with me, and you've made it to the end, I want to thank you enormously. Mother 3 is one of my favorite games ever. When I ended my Earthbound commentary with a teaser of the Pigmass theme on the question mark on the end card, I wasn't sure if I'd ever end up making this video, but I'm glad that I did. It's been an absolute pleasure sharing my experiences with this game with you in this way, and if you've enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to my channel or hitting the bell. There will be more videos to come. So, happy 15th birthday, Mother 3. My name is Mike. Thank you for watching.